Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Gruville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Southern. Madame le deputy Labby.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Luce.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Dublé. Monsieur le deputy Morel. Madame le deputy de Hegera.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Ayer.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Owls. Madame le deputy Gardner. Monsieur le deputy Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Farnham. Madame le deputy Moore. Monsieur le deputy Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Joseph. Monsieur le deputy Balash. Monsieur le deputy Coles.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Poré. Monsieur le deputy Wall.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Miles.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Reniff. Madame le deputy Curtis. Madame le deputy Feltham.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Binet. Madame le deputy Jeune. Madame le deputy Miller.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Howell.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Binet. Monsieur le deputy Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Curtis. Madame le deputy Ward.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Andrews.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir que les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussis au bien-être et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il te plut de commettre à leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions, au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite dans la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal, car à toi est le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le deputy Southern. Madame le deputy Dublé. Vous jurez que Madame le deputy Dublé est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le deputy Morel.
C'est faux.
Madame le deputy Owls.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Gardner. Vous jurez que Madame la députée Gardner est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas résister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le député Farnham.
Defo.
Madame le député Moore.
Sir Deputy Moore is out of the island on State's business.
State's business.
Monsieur le député Joseph.
My lad.
Vous jurez que Monsieur le député Joseph est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas résister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le député Balash.
Defo. Les États sont constitués. The next item of business is mortgage repayment assistance, P48, lodged by Deputy Southern, and the main respondent is the Minister for Treasury and Resources. I invite the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the Chief Minister, in consultation with the Minister for Treasury and Resources, to engage with local mortgage and credit providers with a view to those providers supporting consumers who are struggling to make repayments by A, allowing borrowers to reduce their monthly repayments by extending their mortgage term or switching to interest-only repayments, and B, ensuring that homes will not be repossessed until 12 months after a borrower misses a mortgage payment.
Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. And I wrote this proposition because at the time I could see no sign of activity on the part of ministers, whilst the UK government was making measure after measure and saying things will be all right and reassuring people about their worries. In Jersey, that didn't seem to be happening. So to have the response that we have at the bottom of the page, which says, as a result of the work that has already been undertaken by government, we believe that P48 is already obsolete and we ask members to reject it. That's straightforward. That's the way they treat me more often than not. Asked to reject it. But the question is the problem done with? Is it over? Is the Bank of England succeeding in holding inflation down by its rise in rates? Are you sure that it is? Or are we like to see 7%, 8% sometime in the future if the squeeze comes on? And more people get disappointed by what their mortgage arrangements are. So, we won't take long today, I don't think, but we need to take a look at how many people we're talking about and who they are. So officers continue to monitor the effect of base rate rises on the residential mortgage market. We're covering things, we can count the numbers, we can monitor. Do we do anything? Don't know. A large proportion of residential mortgages in Jersey were taken on fixed rate terms. And of these, the majority were for 5 years. Consequently, we understand, says the Treasury Minister, we understand that relatively few mortgage holders are facing increased mortgage rates at present. Relatively few. Yesterday in the Assembly, we tried to talk about what does relatively few mean? What are the numbers? We were told that approximately 10 to 15% of mortgages might be causing trouble for our mortgagees. What does 10 to 15% mean in real terms? Let's take a quick look. And bear in mind, these are mortgagees with a mortgage. And they're in the 10 to 15%, may be troublesome. They've got worries what's going to happen, what is happening, what their new rate is already, or what their rate will be. What are we doing? So, what does that mean for the voters in Grooville? In Grooville, 10% of the owner-occupied residences, or about up to 150 residences, may have problems, may already be worrying about how they're going to cope, may be squeezed by the rise in prices and their mortgage. In St Brelard, it's up to 300. That's 10 to 15% of the voters. Sounds a lot. St Clements, it's up to 240. St Helier, it's 640 potential troublesome mortgages. For me, that makes me think twice. That makes me think about knocking on doors in 3 years' time and saying, look what I did to help you with your mortgage. At least I tried something. Would the rest of you be able to say that? I don't know. St John, 80. St Martin, 100. St Mary, 50. Good old St Mary. Probably many of those mortgages are over and done with their straightforward owners. Or they may be the next generation coming through with a mortgage, with problems. In St One, it's 100. St Peter, 130. St Saviour, bear this in mind, 300. And Trinity, there are 90. These are troublesome mortgages where the householders may be worried, certainly are worried, and wondering what they're going to do in the future. Today, we have the opportunity to say, don't worry, we're on it. We've passed this proposition, and we can do something to help you. We will engage with your mortgagees. Or we can say, no, sorry, we're done with it. It's over and done with. Never mind that you have a mortgage, which is troublesome. Never mind that you've got debts accumulated because of that mortgage. We're leaving things alone. Is that satisfactory in terms of the relationship between members here and those mortgagees, those voters? We owe them something, I think. So do not pay attention to the words of the Treasury Minister. This is not obsolete, it's ongoing, and we should be doing what we can, even if that is a vague phrase like engaging with mortgage lenders. So I propose this proposition.
Thank you. Is the proposition seconded? Yes, sir. Thank you. Does any member speak on the proposition? Yes, Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. First of all, may I lift a defo on Deputy Farnham
Members agree?
and Deputy Balash?
Members content to do so? The defos are raised on those two deputies. Yes.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I would apologise to the deputy if he was offended by the wording of the comment. Absolutely no offence was intended, and I'm sorry if that's how it came over, if the language is perhaps too blunt. Ministers absolutely share the concerns raised by Deputy Sutherland's proposition regarding the impact of increasing mortgage interest rates. As outlined in the comment we've presented to the Assembly, I have already written directly to all major local mortgage providers. This letter was shared with and communicated widely in the media, and the letter has been included in the comment paper which we submitted. I sent it to the media very deliberately because we know that in Jersey, although many people do borrow through the major high street lenders that we all know, there is a as yet largely unknown number of people who borrow through private and independent lending, and we do not have visibility of that. And by sending that letter to the media, I wanted that message to go out very widely to all people who are taking secured loans over people's homes, that we expect them to behave reasonably in this period. I would hope, certainly, you will be aware that we recently issued a consultation on the regulation of consumer credit, which will include secured lending, and I certainly hope that when we bring that regulation forward, reform, and indeed all members will support us, because that is intended to assist borrowers against poor behaviour by lenders in particular. That's a discussion for another day. If I could return to the letter that was sent requests confirmation that Jersey lenders, in a similar manner to UK institutions, will work with any households holding mortgages secured over their primary residence who are struggling with or worried about higher mortgage repayments. It requests that repossession action will not be commenced unless all other options have been exhausted. And sir, I do believe, having worked for a bank, that repossession is absolutely the last recourse and the last resort for any bank. No bank wishes to put a family out of their home unless they really, really have exhausted all options. Other alternatives may include extending the term of mortgages to reduce monthly payments or the provision of repayment holidays for short periods. The letter was copied to the Jersey Financial Services Commission, the Jersey Bankers Association and Jersey Finance. To date, 2 responses have been received to this letter. It was only sent a couple of weeks ago from lenders, and both responses have given reassurance that large mortgage lenders are already working proactively with mortgage holders or will do so as required. Neither response indicated the need for any further support or action from government at this stage. Should any response be received which indicates that government action or support is needed, we will of course consider that carefully and in a timely way. Sir, I have also more recently received a response from the Jersey Bankers Association, if you excuse me reading my phone, because I don't have a print of it. That letter includes the following. This letter was sent Monday. Our JBA committee met on Friday and all members present were keen to confirm that they would always wish to work with their customers to ensure positive outcomes in all matters. This includes where customers are in any form of financial distress, whether this relates to a mortgage or any other financial service. Our members' recommendation is for customers to approach their lender as soon as possible if they are concerned in any way about their mortgage in order that the position can be reviewed and appropriate action taken. Whilst not party to the UK Mortgage Charter, our members certainly wish to operate within its spirit. I believe a number of members have responded directly with these reassurances. So the JBA have also confirmed that approach. So in addition to the letter, and to give the Deputy and members additional comfort, this is absolutely not a case of one letter. We have the Cost of Living Strategy Group, which meets regularly to monitor things like mortgage rates, inflation, what more we need or can do. I have met all of the big banks in the last couple of months, and the question of lending, both the availability of lending and what the banks will do as regards mortgage borrowers who may be struggling, has very much been a feature of those discussions. In the responses we've had, and I note the Deputy's comments about people who may be struggling, that's not, the banks aren't telling us that. Only one bank so far has notified any issue with people struggling with actually in arrears. 1 or 2 people actually in the island that they've reported. Many banks, when they make a mortgage, do a level of stress testing, where when a mortgage is granted at, say, 4%, they run their checks on the basis of a mortgage being up to 6% to make sure that they think the borrower can actually afford a shock, if you like, of the mortgage increasing. So the banks are absolutely paying attention to this. Government is paying very close attention to this, and I can assure all members that it's not a case of one letter and that's job done. We will continue to keep an eye on that. Just on the 5-year fixed period, that is the case. There will be people in Jersey who are on 5-year fixed terms. Those fixed terms will, of course, be terminating on a rolling period. But I know that one bank still has all of its borrowing, a relatively new lender. I believe most of its borrowing is still on fixed terms. The banks have been relatively positive when I've spoken to them, but I do believe banks are willing to work with the lenders to make sure that they can support people during this difficult time. And as the Deputy has commented, yes, our officers will continue to monitor the effect on base rate rises on the residential mortgage market, as will ministers via the Cost of Living Strategy Group and otherwise. And I would just note that as at today's date, I'm not aware that the UK government has yet provided any support to mortgage borrowers. So, just to return to the wording of the comment, we have already undertaken the work suggested in the comment. The proposition asked the Minister to engage with local mortgage and credit providers with a view to those providers supporting customers who are struggling to make repayments by various means. We have specifically written, we're continuing discussions, that work is very much ongoing, and from that perspective, to write to mortgage holders again would be obsolete, given that I wrote to them 2 weeks ago. But we are absolutely on it, and I think there is simply no need for this proposition to go through the House, because I do assure you that ministers are very much engaged with this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Florence St Saviour.
Thank you, sir. I have been approached already, sir, with people feeling the pinch regarding their mortgages. It's not easy for young couples especially to pay rent, let alone pay a mortgage or even save for a mortgage. But there are people who are finding the pinch quite heavy at the moment. I've been approached by several people in my parish that they say hasn't really kicked in yet, but already we're feeling it bite. I find it quite ironic, actually, that the Minister apologises for any language that may cause offence to the proposer, and then it follows it by potential misbehaviour by lenders. I don't think any lender would willingly go into debt or willingly miss payments. And I think possibly the Minister should withdraw that comment.
Sir,
May you prepared to give way?
Sir.
Sir, I think what I was trying to suggest was misbehaviour by the lender, that is the person who has lent money. There are private lenders out there who are not subject to any mortgage code. We do not know how they will behave. It almost goes back to our discussion yesterday about poor landlords. There will be poor lenders, and very much part of our concern with consumer credit legislation is to control conduct of lenders and the way they behave with the borrower. I'm not suggesting that it is the borrower that's misbehaving.
I thank the Minister for that explanation, sir, and I withdraw my comment. I myself and my wife had a mortgage until recent years, and it was the drop in mortgage rates, I believe, in 2008, which was of great relief, because it meant I think we had about £450 extra a month to live on, and we weren't really suffering as much as we were previously. But as I say, there are many people out there suffering now, and even though I will admit we have no mandate to instruct banks or lenders on what to do, I think we need to send a message there, and I'm very tempted to support this, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Rob Ward, about to press your button, perhaps you won't. Who'd like to speak next?
It worries me that you
Deputy
might be able
Rob
to
Ward.
see in my mind.
Well, I saw your hand. You see. Your hand moving
I
towards
assure
the
you, sir,
button.
that might not be a place you want to go. Certainly a place I don't want to go. I will speak, sir. I was going to speak early. I think the word irony is apt for this. This proposition is an opportunity for this assembly. Now, let me get this really clear as to what I'm saying here. It's an opportunity for this assembly to send a message. It absolutely support what the minister's doing and say to the minister, yes, carry on that communication. But I don't think Deputy Southern's saying, just write another letter. What this proposition is saying, you know, engage, and the wording is to Ministry of Treasury and Resources to engage with local mortgage and credit providers, even those that the minister and assistant ministers may have concerns about, that aren't regulated. They are credit and mortgage providers. Engage with them. This assembly is saying, go and engage because we are concerned about people on this island who are struggling. It's a message from this assembly. And so I have to say it. And I really hope this can be taken well and not get in the way of my argument in saying this assembly is saying. But I am concerned that the assembly is perhaps not being taken as I'm very, very carefully choosing my words now, sir. That this assembly is not being taken watered down in terms of its influence, because this is the primary legislative body of this island. And it's not just about governments doing things. It's about the government doing things with the support and the direction of this assembly. And if we lose that, sir, we lose our unique democracy. And yes, I know you may be sat there, sir, members may be sat there saying, yeah, you're going a little bit far with that link. But let's think this through, sir. This is a direction from the Assembly to say, engage, because borrowers, allowing borrowers to reduce their monthly payments. The government saying, with the backing of the Assembly, to all of those lenders, okay, that we are saying, please, let's not let people on this island who are going to struggle, and they are struggling as mortgage rates go up. It's particularly so when they hit that point when they might come to the end of a fixed term deal, because they're going to really be hit by a figure. And it's saying, sir, we as an assembly are saying to government, what are you doing? Great, brilliant, carry on, but more power to your elbow. You've got our backing. We're saying to you, keep on doing it. Protect people. Have every engagement you can with providers to say from this assembly that we want to try and ensure that those people with mortgages are protected as far as they can. And so this proposition is nothing but well-intentioned. It's not playing politics. It's not playing silly people. It's not trying to say we're making a point. It came from interactions that we've had with people who talk to us all the time and come along to our constituents and say, I don't know what, can't government do something about mortgages and try and help us out a little? And we'll say, yeah, I'm sure they can. We'll do what we can. And so this was brought to the Assembly quickly, pertinently, at the right time with the right intention. And I've got to say, sir, I'm disappointed that the word obsolete was used, because this is far from obsolete. This is about saying that engagement from this assembly is really important. And this assembly, we swear an oath, sir, that we will commit to this assembly above everything else. And so therefore, as soon as we say that this assembly's propositions are not needed, we are contradicting some of the things that we've said in this assembly. And that when we stand up in the Royal Court and put our hand up, and I can't remember which one it is, I think it's the left, I don't know. Obviously, so I always go left. The right hand, thank you, Mark. And we say that. So this is really simple. It's not asking for anything extra, it's asking continuous and giving the backing of the Assembly to government to do it. So I ask a simple question. What else are we here for? So I strongly recommend members to support this. Let's get this done and let's move on to the next one so that we can get some help and we support government from this assembly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other members speak on this proposition? Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I agree, the proposition's well intentioned. If only it were that simple. I remember when I once worked for a large firm in London, it did pro bono work for a charity for the homeless. And the way this charity raised funds often was to visit the homes of elderly people and persuade them of the value of their work. And these elderly people often would leave money to that charity, overlooking the fact that often there was perhaps a relative who is poor, who was looking after them in their home and was going to be made homeless as a result. There was some sort of irony there. So a lot of my work actually involved trying to get funds to ensure that that particular individual wouldn't be made homeless. And the way I had to do that was to write to the Charity Commission, because under the rules of these charities, they weren't allowed to just give money away. They had to respect their own constitution. They weren't allowed to, it was a very kind of complex system. But anyway, basically, that's what the role entailed. I also have done a lot of work in terms of bank financing, as I am quite convinced Deputy Miller also has. And again, it's not that simple. Banks take deposits. They have to have a certain amount of deposits in order to lend money. A lot of that money is actually backed by its own borrowing, which actually is on terms that relatively match. So the question I have, because I've looked at this proposition, and my real question has been, okay, so you're looking to the banks to provide this assistance, but what exactly are you asking of them that's more than the work that's already been done? And to what extent are you asking them to perhaps change their own rules? Because generally it is in the interest of banks not to be solvent, not to repossess even, and that in itself takes a certain amount of time to go through court. So what exactly needs to be done? There was a reference also to the manner in which the Bank of England is succeeding in holding down interest rates. Well, again, that's a problematic issue. I've actually in correspondence or in questions to the Treasury Minister asked about the prudence of relying on the Bank of England's modelling full stop. But we come back to this whole issue of how, given the risk that is taken in terms of taking a mortgage, how are you actually going to have that managed? Who are you going to require to do that? So I'm just unclear, and I think it would be helpful if the Deputy explained a bit more what precisely is this action that he's asking banks to take, or the government to ask the banks to take, in order to provide this assistance that hasn't already been taken within the parameters what's possible already. And I will also come back to the point that we don't just have this problem for people who've got mortgages in terms of the repayment of mortgages. We've seen actually situations in the past where mortgage rates have gone up even higher. We have the potential problem of negative equity, which links into this whole problem of what happens when many houses come onto the market and prices start tumbling down, and you've got people who can't really repay their loans because, in fact, they can't sell their house for the value at which they acquired it. Again, it's another problem, as is the possibility that even people who are just paying rent are borrowing money of credit card companies, which and the rates of borrowing's going up, and that's actually giving a problem in terms of paying that rent. And in all these cases, there has to be a safety net. Government, as far as I'm aware, does provide that safety net. It could do better. As I say, I keep coming back to this, the manner in which we're providing social housing and as a safety net. But generally, the question being asked is, are banks actually doing enough to support or help people who can't pay their mortgages? And what exactly is the action that is being asked of the banks, that government is being asked to take?
Thank you, David. Does any of them speak on this proposition? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, sir. When the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel reviewed the government plan at the end of last year, we did have discussions with the Treasury Minister and his team about what might be forthcoming to assist people with mortgages who might have been facing difficult circumstances at that point. We had some back and forth on that, and we decided as a panel not to pursue any action on that at that point because of the assurances we'd received that the government were looking at it, and at one point were likely to bring something to the government plan. And then after the deadline for lodging any amendments to the government plan had passed, we found out that in actual fact they'd had second thoughts about that and didn't bring anything to the government plan And we found that very frustrating because as a panel we felt helpless to ourselves attempt to do something and bring something to this assembly to ask them to consider for particular courses of action that might support those with mortgages who were struggling. That situation was very frustrating. It is pleasing to see the action that the government has taken that we've found out about in the last few weeks. We found out about it after Deputy Southern had lodged this proposition. And I have to say, I share the disappointment that I know some colleagues feel when this proposition says at the end about this proposition being obsolete and therefore needing to reject it. And I don't think it can be described as obsolete. This Assembly has not, at this point, said or done anything or cast a vote on anything that shows our view as a body about actions the government ought to be taking to support those with mortgages. It's all very well to say, let the government get on with it, and if they've done some things that are commendable, that's fine. But this is the supreme decision-making body of the island, and we haven't had an opportunity to say anything yet. And what Deputy Southern's proposition does is it gives a mandate from this body to the government to engage with local mortgage and credit providers. It allows all of us as representatives of the people of Jersey to say this is work we believe ought to be done on behalf of our constituents, many of whom will be extremely anxious at the economic conditions that will be affecting or could risk affecting how much they have to live on every month whilst maintaining ownership in their homes. And okay, when you take out a mortgage, obviously to some extent that's a risk, and there can be economic downturns that affect your ability to pay that. But it is right that the government does what it can to support people who have made those steps towards home ownership, not to lose out or not to have that swept away from before them because of economic conditions, if the government can do something about it. It was nice to receive the update from government and the publication of the letter that they'd sent out, but it's not something that this body, the States Assembly, has had any input towards, and it's something that I, for one, would like some input towards. I'm sure other States members would. That was the vibe I got from the Constable of St Saviour when he spoke. That's what it sounded like. He wanted to have a say in as well on behalf of the people he represents. So this proposition can't be obsolete because of the unique and first opportunity it's given this body to cast a verdict on this. That's not happened before, so this is the first time for it to do it. And I think the government should welcome that and say thank you and accept Deputy Southern's proposition, which would have been, I think, very easy to do based on what they've already done and what he's asking for, and say, okay, this is now a joint thing between the Assembly and government, a shared priority across both organisations, and keep us in the loop a bit more about what's happening so we can hold them to account if we don't think they're going far enough, and that we can speak out on behalf of our constituents if we're encountering those who are facing anxiety because of the economic conditions and difficulties some might have with paying those mortgages back. So I think this proposition is an attempt at inclusivity, and it's disappointing that the government describes that as obsolete. It's not. It causes no harm whatsoever for this Assembly to adopt it, and I would urge the government to reconsider their objections to it and ask them to support it and have a more collaborative approach on this particular subject. And if they're not prepared to do that, I'll at least be voting in favour of it.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. We are here today, and I think once again we see that the government are encouraging credit lenders to take a certain decision. And we've seen that with landlords back in November and December when the government was saying, you know, we do encourage that you do not subject your tenants to rental hikes. And we are seeing a similar story unfold here today. I think Deputy Southern has done the right thing, bringing this proposition forward before the Assembly, and actually he has taken the initiative probably before the Council of Ministers, and that's the job of a non-executive member, to enforce the executive when the executive are not doing its job appropriately. And I think we need to bear in mind with inflation, much of it is obviously imported from the UK, and of course a base rate has an impact on inflation that comes into the island. And we need to consider the many households who have mortgages, the high level of expenditure that is incurred for those households, the inability to save as they were a couple of years ago. So what can we, as a government, do? And as a government, I think today we can support this proposition. It is about engaging with credit lenders, and it is about informing credit lenders that they have a job and a duty to provide assurances to mortgage holders, to provide the opportunity for those mortgage holders to have reduced payments where possible, to have an extended time to pay those debt obligations off, and also to have the opportunity to go to interest-only repayments. I think this is something that has been highlighted under Part A in the proposition. And looking at Part B, this is where I would not consider the proposition to be obsolete, because it's asking for conditions to be set, and that is for credit lenders to not repossess the property unless a repayment has not been made for 12 months. Now, I think many credit lenders would have a robust process in place where by those who are mortgage holders would have to go through a process. They'd have to make sure that nobody's going to be defaulting on their mortgage, because at the end of the day, it is the banks who own the property until the mortgage has been paid off. So why would you be taking a risk where somebody is unable to then pay off the mortgage obligation and not be able to actually provide any repayment within a 12-month period, when we are, at this moment in time, facing a tight labour market? If people do lose their jobs, there are plenty of other jobs available. So there is plenty of mobility and flexibility within the labour market if some people do incur a job loss. And today, we just need to think about the role of the government. Is the government supposed to be getting itself involved or not? And I think this is potentially maybe an ideological argument where you would see the left-centre politicians who would say, well, no, the government has got to take action. And then you might say, with some politicians, they'll say, no, just allow the market to be. There shouldn't be any intervention, and all we should be doing is encouraging. But if we've only received 2 letters back, what does that say? Because surely all credit lenders should be responding to inform the government about what they are doing objectively to provide assurances for their customers. So the message isn't really getting out there. Okay, letters have been sent, but that's a really poor response. And no further decision-making has taken place. So therefore, this proposition at least provides some answers, because as an assembly, if we vote to approve it, then at least something can be followed through. So that's all I've got to say, sir. So thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on this proposition? Yeah, Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. I don't often speak on propositions, but I think I'm one of those mortgage payers whose 5-year fixed rate actually came up for renewal at the beginning of this year. And I experienced a 34% increase in my monthly repayments, which I've had to navigate on my own. And I actually seriously considered standing down from this position in order to find a job that would help me cover that increase in a lot more manageable way. So I was really disheartened to read the comments of this proposition, and I know my fellow party members have probably covered a lot of what I'm about to say, but I just don't understand why we've been asked to reject it. I feel that if this work is already being undertaken by the government, surely accepting this proposition won't actually make a difference. From what I see, and I can understand, this proposition doesn't actually tie anyone's hands. It doesn't put any clear requirements. If anything, it is actually showing a truly cross-assembly collaborative approach, and that's something that we've heard on many occasions throughout this term already. It will show the government that the Assembly as a whole wants to go in this direction, and it also safeguards against any changes that may or may not happen in government, whether that is this term or next term. So I think, this proposition is quite clear in its wording. It's just asking the government to engage with local mortgage and credit providers with a view to those providing support, supporting consumers who are struggling to make repayments. It doesn't go into the minute detail on how that may be done. I think that's deliberately been left open to allow flexibility for the government and deliberately not tie anyone's hands. I mean, I don't think I've heard anything that would logically justify anyone voting against this. And I think members either want government to do what they can and is within their power to support mortgage payers, or they don't. It's that simple, sir. So I would urge members to accept this. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on this proposition? Yes, Constable Brewer.
Yes, sir, thank you. I've been approached, as well as my colleague from St Saviour's, by private individuals, one of whom's case was quite distressing, in so much as they'd saved for 15 years for a deposit on a house, sir. They were married, they've got a little one. They moved into their house, and very sadly their relationship deteriorated and they split up. And now that the young lady's left on her own as a single mother with a massive mortgage that's practically doubled. So there are people who have issues, and I know they may be, yes, some will say we've had low mortgage rates since the crash of 2008. I've benefited from that, as have many in this house. But my parents were paying 17% plus in their generation, so let's not forget their struggles also. But there are cases, sir, that people are genuinely struggling with this, and I congratulate the Minister for keeping in contact with mortgage lenders. I think that's the way forward. But I also think that our colleagues on the benches opposite are right. The message should be going out from this Assembly to say, let's support those people. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Constable. No other members to speak. Then Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. We find ourselves in one of those situations where perhaps the way that members will vote this morning pinges upon the meaning of the proposition, and perhaps a word in the Minister's comment which could have been more carefully chosen. A lawyer probably would have chosen their words more carefully, sir, because when it comes to the underlying issue, it is, for my part, quite heartening that everything I've heard from members supports the work that the Assistant Minister has been doing with mortgage lenders and the work that she is doing with credit providers. So that work has not just started with a letter being issued to the banks. That work started months ago through the good offices of the Economist in the Economy Department, together with the Assistant Minister's Financial Services officials. And that has been ongoing. And it then resulted in the letter being issued post, I admit, Deputy Southern's lodging of the proposition. But the engagement had already been ongoing in light of and in advance of the mortgage charter that the UK spoke to high street lenders about. And therefore the work is not obsolete. The work will continue because government ministers do agree that the best approach is to continue to work with banks to make sure that islanders don't find themselves in a situation where their homes are repossessed because they can't afford to pay their mortgage. And other members with experience have said quite clearly why that is only ever a last resort. And so to some extent, whilst we think that the UK Mortgage Charter is a good base, we actually take the view that we want banks to be working to seek to ensure that islanders' homes are not repossessed during these difficult times, and not just in the terms of the Charter, but it might be that banks here in Jersey can go further because of the loan to debt value, but that is an ongoing conversation that the Assistant Minister will have. Deputy Andrews said that he thought that only 2 more formal letters wasn't a very good return. Reality is that as the Assistant Minister said, she's had a response from the JBA, which is all of those high street lenders across our community are members of that body, and they might write individual and they might write through the JBA. So we agree that this work is the right thing to do. Whether it requires the further support of the Assembly, it's probably each member will decide. We in Treasury, and I know the Assistant Minister in their role as Assistant Chief Minister, believe that we are given a mandate by the Assembly and this falls within that mandate, and therefore we should get on with doing what we think is the right thing for mortgage holders in liaising with banks, and not wait for a decision of the Assembly, which is exactly what we've done. So I'm going to perhaps take, and I'm sure the Assistant Minister would be in agreement, although I've not checked with her, take the view that we stand by our comments, we've done the work, and the reason we stand by our comments is because this proposal asks us to engage. We have engaged, been engaging for months, and we will continue to engage because the issue doesn't remove itself. If members, and I hope not all members, but if some members think that actually they'd just like to say, well done ministerial team, you're doing a great job, we want you to keep doing that great job. We're grateful that Deputy Southern would, in effect, that's what he was saying in his opening speech, and if he says it in his closing speech, if members vote in favour of it, we'll take that as confirmation that we are doing the right thing and will continue to do that right thing, but we're not about to start to engage because we've already engaged and will continue engaging. So we're in one of those slightly odd situations where we're doing what the proposer is asking us to start to do. We've already done it and we'll continue doing it because we think it's in the best interest of mortgage holders, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Comment Arbison Clement.
Thank you, sir. So I have a certain sympathy with this proposition. In 1989-92, I was a casualty of the Great Crash, and I lost the shirt off my back. And it's the only time as an adult I cried my eyes out. So I do have sympathy. I know that people are in trouble, and there are things that that we can rely on. And one of those things, Deputy Southern, is the parishes. At St Clement's, we've got a fantastic community support team, and we will look at all things to do with debt, and we'll help people out as best we can, including making representatives to bank and mortgage lenders. I think one of the situations we've got to be very careful of is that we need to recall when the great banking crash happened a few years ago, which was the entire responsibility of the banking world. They created havoc by being greedy. Their mortgage books were overloaded and they couldn't support the mortgage situations that they were upholding. And so do we trust them? I'm not so sure. Have they changed does a leopard change its spots? I'm not too sure. So I think there's a problem here. I do think that there is support out there from from the third sector and also the parishes. But the problem I have with this proposition is it's too prescriptive. In section B, you are asking us to ensure that homes will not be repossessed until 12 months. I think the banks are going to do that because we don't know the backstory. The banks know the backstory, or anybody that's supporting them will know the backstory. And I think where this proposition falls flat is that one word, ensuring. I would have supported it without that word. Banks aren't going to go for it. We must lobby the banks through the parishes, through our own good officers, to try and ensure that the least harm that is done as possible. The banking model is reliant on, as much as the customer takes the risk on the interest rates through the Bank of England, etc., they're also passing on that risk to elsewhere. And so the accumulation of all the lending is remortgaged elsewhere through various means. So they're also taking risks. So they have a very difficult situation to uphold. I don't necessarily support them. I think they have to be, watched and monitored. But this is too far. It's too prescriptive, and the word ensuring kills it for me, unfortunately. Thanks very much, sir.
Thank you, Tom. Lady Feltham.
Thank you, sir. I was listening to Deputy Gorst with some interest, and he described ministers being in an odd situation. I actually feel that it's the rest of us members that are in an odd situation, because we heard ministers telling us that they fully agree with this proposition, and yet they're urging us to vote against it. I can hear the Treasury Minister saying that they don't agree with it. I think what they were saying is that they're already doing this work, so the proposition is obsolete. And he said that actually his officers were considering whether or not they needed the support of the Assembly, which I thought was very odd words to come from a minister. We considered whether or not we need the support of the Assembly. Now, what this proposition does do is enable us as elected representatives to give direction and show leadership. And that is entirely our role. I speak to constituents regularly, and I know that many of my constituents are very worried. They're very worried because a number of them are currently on fixed rate mortgages, and those rates are due to come to an end within the next year or so. This situation isn't a situation that is about to pass. For a lot of people, it's a situation that is about to happen. And that is why dialogue needs to continue. And it's not enough to say we're doing it already, and why we as an Assembly need to provide the leadership and say to ministers, we support you to continue those conversations, and we believe that action needs to happen. I think that's our role as constituency representatives and also as political leaders. I just want to answer back the Constable of St Clement as well. I know he was concerned particularly about the wording of Part B, but I'd draw his attention to the wording of the rest of the proposition, which says to continue to engage. I think engagement is absolutely crucial, with a view to those providers supporting consumers. So what we're saying is this is the ambition, this is the aim, this is where we want to get to. But I think those words acknowledge the fact that we may not get there, but I think what we're doing is we're saying that is the aim, that is what we're striving for, and I think that's absolutely what we should be striving for, and that's absolutely the message that we want to send to ministers, and also we want to send to the people of Jersey, who are currently very, very worried about what might happen to them in the next few years. and I encourage everybody to support this proposition, whether they are in ministerial ranks or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Balash.
So I think that the Constable of St Clement is right in saying that the problem with this proposition is really its specificity. If the proposition had read to request the Chief Minister in consultation with the Minister for Treasury and Resources to engage with local mortgage and credit providers with a view to those providers supporting consumers who are struggling to make repayments, and stopped there, there would be no reason why members could not support the proposition. In fact, as the Assistant Treasury Minister and Treasury Minister have told us, the government is doing exactly that. So the need for the resolution is not so pressing. But it's the paragraphs, borrowed. It's the paragraphs A and B which cause the problems, allowing borrowers to reduce their monthly repayments and ensuring that homes will not be repossessed. These are matters of contract between the banks and their finance providers and the individual borrowers. And the states, nor the government actually, have power to interfere in those contractual arrangements and to procure any of those things happening. We can request the mortgage providers to do these things. And that's exactly what the government is doing, but it's not what the proposition says. And I think members should therefore vote against it, because I don't think that the state should be party to a resolution which shows the states to be toothless.
Thank you. Does any other member to speak on this proposition? I call upon Deputy Sutherland to reply. Deputy Sutherland.
Thank you, sir. And I'm quite surprised, actually, about how many people contributed, but I'd like to thank them in the first place anyway. And I want to draw people's attention, especially Deputy Balash, who deployed one of the easiest tactics in this assembly in order to make sure that the backbenchers proposition doesn't get through. You can either say it's too detailed and you've got it wrong, or you can say it's too vague and it's not worth having. And the deputy is fully aware of that. So when he says don't vote for this, I say, well, hang on, let's take a look at the rules of the game when we play up being politicians. Surely one of those rules is, in fact, the prime rule is do no harm. We can at least do no harm with going some way to doing the right thing. And I must admit it's quite amusing to listen to Deputy Gorst when he comes ever so close to saying, and so we'll withdraw our objection because we're doing it anyway, so vote for this proposition. We're going to do it anyway. I think he came very close to it. And the fact that we need to do something, I mean, I've already been to a meeting where on rents, where people were advised to go to Andium and seek advice from Social Security, etc., about coping with their rents, given the way inflation has gone. Is there no place somewhere in the grand scheme of things for the government and the lenders to get together and say, come and see us if you've got problems with your mortgage? Absolutely none whatsoever. I don't believe so. And I thank Deputy Alves, who basically summed up the situation with her own situation. She is one of the 640 in St Helier problems with their mortgages. If it's any consolation to her, I would say, and the best person I would go to listen to mortgage issues would be her. if anybody can solve things, she can, certainly in terms of her spreadsheet. So I thank all that spoke, and I urge members to vote for this. It does, as it says on the can, do no harm.
If I was being called for, members are invited to return to their seats. I invite the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the proposition has been rejected. 19 votes for, 24 votes contra.
So much for collaborative work.
Can we have the 19, please?
Yes.
Those members voting for: the Conitard of St Helier, Trinity, Grouville, St Juan and St Saviour, and Deputies Southern, Labby, Tadier, Rob Ward, Alves, Farnham, Mezek, Coles, Porre, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Jern, Kovac and Andrews.
The next item is entitlement to work reduction in residence requirements, lodged by Deputy Kovac. The main respondent is the Chief Minister. I invite the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the Chief Minister, A, in light of the current difficulties in recruitment of staff, to implement a temporary scheme by September 2023, further to which any registered individual who has been continuously ordinarily resident in the island since the 31st of December 2020 will be eligible for entitled to work status until December 2025 or such time as they attain 5-year residency. B, to extend the scheme detailed in paragraph A to the spouse, civil partner or eligible partner of an individual eligible for the scheme identified in paragraph A, provided the spouse or partner is also ordinarily resident in Jersey. And C, to investigate the implications of a reduction in the 5-year residency requirement to receive entitled to work status and to report back to the Assembly on the feasibility of such a reduction by the 30th of June 2024.
Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. My proposals are to help employment issues from two sides. To try help address areas where there are staff shortages like retail, hospitality, constructions, the provision of care, but equally, the other side is to enable people who already live in Jersey and consider making Jersey their home to take up gainful employment appropriate for their skills, to encourage them to want to continue living here and to not take their skills elsewhere. This proposition is seeking to A, allow access to jobs over 5 years residency to everyone who has been in Jersey since before the end of 2020 and continues to be here until 2025. This period is not randomly selected, and it is linked to the pre-settled category, but to be fair, extended to everyone here during the same period. The people in this time window have been here about 3 years already, which most likely makes them wanting to continue to call Jersey their homes, and the pre-settled have already been granted permission to stay and obtain the 5 years residency. Upon implementation of such changes, the pre-settled could quick obtain the entitled to work card based on their status certificate, which already proves that most of that time spent here has been verified. The rest would just go through the normal process of verifying the system for the periods they were present here, quick process if they worked most of this time, as employers' contributions would show that record. B. When I'm talking in Part B about partners of those in Part A, they have to follow the immigration rules of being considered a partner, as with the related previous proposition. They are also not expected to be too many, and many for a significantly lower period, as from experience, not too many are coming from the beginning with their families to work abroad. If those partners were brought after, they, upon member in Part A attaining the entitled to work after 5 years, they automatically already fall into the married and unmarried partners regulations. Accepting the partners as well will enable them to continue to want to be here and raise a family here, contributing both with their skills to our economy. This can't be a bad thing, given that this pool of people has the last lot outside of the common travel area that could still work without a visa and are allowed to stay to obtain the 5 years residency. Part C. This is a unique time period opportunity that won't come again to test and gather evidence in a limited time space with limited consequences, simply using the resources on the island of how the labor force would act upon relaxing the 5 years residency rules for employment, applied like for recently adopted changes for married partners with no impact on housing or benefits. This accurate data collection can be easily done through the CLS system, the Customer and Local Services System. After this period, due to Brexit, these 5 years rules would apply in majority just to the workers from the common travel area, as everyone else would be coming to work on a visa. Presently, we have people living here who don't fit into the right or any category, and they may also be facing some hardship because they do not qualify for any benefits. This proposition allows people to help themselves, and it raises tax and social security revenue. If this proposition passes, their access to housing or benefits rights won't change, but would enable people to take additional work or upgrade their earnings based on their skills, which is equally important for them during this cost of living crisis, but for our economy as well. Again, raising additional revenue through tax and social security. These people are already living here. There is a requirement for people to work in most sectors of our economy. There are vacancies for them to fill, and there is a desperate need for them to do so. From the Jobs in Jersey page on the gov.ge, as of Saturday, 15th of July, 2023, there were about 1,040 jobs advertised, many for weeks or months. Some have stopped advertising. Of this total of about 400 were in health and social care, hospitality and catering, retail and sales. Many of these jobs have been there for months, and some employers have given up advertising, as I've said. Important to mention that many other jobs would be advertised on other websites or platforms than this. For many, this lack of staff is restricting their ability to properly function as a viable business. I believe my proposal will help them survive. For example, we recently heard that there is a shortage of trained staff to keep nurseries open for longer hours to suit parents and employment. Are we really saying that if someone living amongst us is suitably qualified to work here with children, they should be stopped because of red tape? We have the opportunity to address this issue. This also applies to teaching jobs as well, which we've seen they had to resort to strike for how underpaid and overworked they are, trying to fill up multiple roles at once due to not enough staff in our schools. I know as a certainty that there are those disqualifications within this category, and I'm including in my proposition, but they cannot even apply or be invited to an interview due to the 5 years restriction. We have the opportunity to address this. I've seen that even a cleaner job in a school is advertised as requiring 5 years. Are you aware of how many teachers do the school cleaning as well on top of their job? I've seen them doing it. We know many catering outlets are operating on reduced hours because of staff shortages and unfilled vacancies. Quite few people from the group of workers I'm proposing that work reduced hours somewhere or have full-times in retail or other sectors are desperate to round up their earnings during the high cost of living by working over weekends or shifts, evening shifts or different days in hospitality that when they would be most needed as well by hospitality, but due to this restriction, they can't help much. Many people like that approach me. Everyone knowing my long-time involvement in the hospitality sector as a worker, a manager, and now by having a family business in hospitality, knows my dedication to help the industry, and I won't propose something that I would know to cause severe damage to the employers in this sector, as the Council of Ministers comments imply it would cause. Yes, we should expect some movements, but in both directions, and not near to the extent that is highlighted in those comments. And if those movements from hospitality fill up many of the most required skills jobs in the economy, based on interview and merit, isn't that a very good win for our economy as well? Also ensuring that we don't lose that person as well by them moving their skills off the island if not allowed here. It is much harder and it costs much more to import experienced and qualified skilled people for these roles than to bring a seasonal worker. Plus, the businesses that said it worked well to cover hospitality roles with work permit workers don't have to change anything to that and can continue to do so if they wish. Caring as a career is perhaps not proving so attractive and has competition between providers. I believe my proposals could add to the workforce, not reduce it. As from my work for years within the community, I know we also have the skills and interest in this area within this category of people. In the problems we have seen at the Jersey airport, caused by the lack of staff at Swissport, a big part plays also the restriction to their ability to employ local under 5 years residency, resourcing, I've been told, to even flying over staff from UK for a week, putting them in a hotel and flying them back. And I don't think this is helpful for our economy. We should, I believe, looking at how, by working together, we can find solutions. Provide gainful skills related employment across the economy and assist businesses to operate and survive is really important. Productivity in our economy can be achieved in many other ways than just through digital innovations that's mainly highlighted in the future economy. An important contributor would be to allow everyone use their skills where they best see it fit, and my proposition would allow that. The latest report from 30th of June 2023 from Statistics Jersey measuring employment, which contains some very good news about the reduction in people actively seeking work. This remains, as per previous quarter, as just over 600. Of this number, only 30 individuals from EU accession Brexit are included. Therefore, introducing Brexit in the comments paper in regard to my proposal is misplaced. This report from the Statistics Jersey, it shows that within the actively seeking work numbers, 170 were claiming long-term incapacity allowance. However, 50 of those were engaged in some form of employment and perhaps had the capacity to become more active in the workplace. My reason for saying this is that I believe there are many options to consider and include when we are all trying to solve the issues we have with labor shortages. So whilst it is good news that the numbers who are actively seeking work remains at a low level and hopefully continues to do so, it still does make life difficult for those employers trying to recruit experienced and qualified staff, and my proposal seeks to assist with this. It will not open any floodgates or cause havoc in the labor market. It is a short-term measure helping employers and prospective employees to address this issue sooner, and it is raising additional revenue to the state's funds. Third, I think worth reminding members that at the height of the COVID pandemic in May 2020, there were about 2,300 people who registered as actively seeking work. And since November 2022, it has been 700 or less per month, showing positive signs of recovery, but also pressure for many employers seeking to recruit suitable, qualified, or experienced staff, which my proposal seeks to help. On 11th of April this year, and debated on 23rd of May, the Chief Minister proposed the draft control of housing and work, residential employment status regulations, giving unmarried partners the same employment rights as those married or in civil partnership. This received unanimous support from this Assembly. From the answer of that debate, I was pleased to hear Deputy Stevenson saying, the Council of Ministers is committed to addressing the labor shortages that many employers are currently facing. Those that spoke then all expressed their support. I hope they will show similar support to my proposals, which seek to go a bit further, and I believe will provide some common sense solutions towards some of our recruitment and retention problems, and to a number of sectors in our economy. And again, it will raise additional revenue and address the issue. Third, I want to touch briefly on the production of regulations and the timeline for doing so. I would like to remind members that during the COVID pandemic, this had to be done with some focus and speed, and has been done successfully. At the same time, the related regulations changes to the unmarried partners have been done quite quick and easy. Similarly, the very recent changes to allow students arriving in Jersey with their parents to be given access to jobs over 5 years residency has been done extremely quick, with ministerial decision from the Chief Minister and no requirement to be brought to the Assembly. It shows it can be done really quick when there is will, and as we see, in different ways as well than just by changing laws and regulations. If it would be to still amend the regulations, I would suggest the Minister could have changed or added a subparagraph in the related regulations, the text of my proposition, similarly as it was done for the unmarried partners, which then will cease on its own on the expiry at the end of 2025 and doesn't seem so difficult to do anymore. Then, as it was said in the previous related amendments to the regulations, these changes would come into force 7 days after the day on which they are made, so surely it could be in place by the end of September if there's will. I was glad to see, upon speaking with Jersey Business and Jersey Hospitality Association about my proposition, that they are both in support of it. I hope members have read the letter I have circulated yesterday with related comments from Jersey Hospitality Association. If not, I hope they get the chance until we come to voting. I have mentioned in the same email that Jersey Business has also provided the Council of Ministers with views on the proposition. As these have not been referenced in their comments paper nor circulated, I'll read out the short text of it. We have had no direct feedback on the P49 debate this week from business. However, we concluded that's due to business being unaware of the proposition. We are confident that business would support any change which increased the number of entitled to work individuals available. Another benefit is that it may enable a more upskilling of workers, as individuals with less than 5 years cannot access funding for apprenticeship or other government-subsidized training. Further, it may assist in the retention of some of the current registered workers who may be finding it difficult to get the right jobs and therefore considering leaving the island. One potential unintended consequence of this proposed change is that there may be movement of workers from the core industries of retail, hospitality, and agriculture to the financial sector, as the change will give individuals the ability to choose what jobs they apply for based on their skills rather than residency restrictions. However, of those workers, we are unlikely to see considerable movement, as many are seasonal workers. Overall, our view is that the change will have a positive impact. I'm happy to see business industry supporting this, and I hope the states members will also see the important, unique opportunity we have now. In a limited time frame, therefore having limited consequences, to fill up important vacancies quicker and with the right skills to raise additional revenue and enable people already on the island to thrive. Finally, the Hansard from 23rd May this year, when questioned by Deputy Feltham about her policy position in relation to population and migration in her role as Assistant Minister, Deputy Stephenson said she would equally value every individual within that population and went to say, "My policy position has not changed since I wrote my manifesto." In her manifesto on Voda.ge, she wrote, "It's time for a better kind of government which puts islanders at the heart of decisions and makes everyone feel like a valued member of the community." It is nice to agree, and I hope we can continue to do so. Sir, in conclusion, I'm bringing this proposal to assist employers, many of whom are struggling to recruit staff, and also those people living in our community who wish to play a productive and positive part, as well as earning an income whilst increasing the revenue raised. I now make the proposition, sir. Thank you.
Is the proposition seconded? Yes, sir. Thank you. Does any member speak on the proposition? If no member wishes to speak, Tadia.
Thanks, sir. Get the ball rolling, I guess. Is the clock ready? Thank you, sir. First of all, can I congratulate Deputy Kovacs on what I know is a well-researched proposition. She's put a lot of hard work into it because we had regular updates on it. And as she said, she's been driven by a desire to recognise many factors, the prime of which is the fact that many employers, especially in hospitality, but it's right across the board, are finding it difficult to recruit at the moment. We're in an unusual situation in Jersey. We can't say for sure, but we're perhaps at that point where we might be facing depopulation rather than population growth. But what is certain is that it's an employees market, that there are more job availabilities out there, job opportunities and vacancies, than there are people to do that. And it seems sensible, therefore, rather than simply saying, do we want to bring more people in automatically to do those jobs, to start looking at the people that are already in the island. Not just anybody who's in the island, but the very people who have survived Brexit and who have decided to stay despite the changes in Brexit, which none of us voted for, none of the public voted for, yet we're having to deal with the consequences. And many of those Europeans in particular who were working in Jersey found their status changed overnight. And they've remained, if you like, loyal to the island. They're still here, they're still doing the jobs. And I think that's the particular interesting part of this proposition. Irrespective, this isn't about whether we think the 5-year rule is still valid or needs to be changed. There are arguments around the 5 years and the 10-year rule which probably need to be looked at, I think, in this term of office, because we are living in a changing world. And there are lots of questions about fairness around that. But that's not what we're here to debate today. We're saying we do have this current requirement, and we're saying that we have a group of people who are in this transitory period who are already working in the economy and who could be used more flexibly to fill jobs. That could be a win-win for both the employer and the employee. I think it's also important to put this in context of the wider policy that's going on civically, but also within government. And I think of one very interesting organisation that's just recently been created, which is the International Cultural Centre, which I think is still in its formation, but is already doing some very interesting work. I've seen some of that, and I know, for example, that in my capacity putting on the French Festival this year, that the International Cultural Centre were very supportive in helping some of those events that were put on in the name of the French community in Jersey. But they do that for all communities, and they work closely with other communities in the island. And I think if there's, I'm sure there are lots of things that this government can be praised for. And I think one of the approaches is the fact that they seem to be taking a more, I don't think the right word is ecumenical, but I don't know what the secular word is, but they're taking an approach which is recognising Jersey's cosmopolitan nature, which is certainly much more cosmopolitan than it might have been when I was a young lad, and they're recognising that as a strength, and I congratulate them, and I think that's something that we all recognise in a modern, outward-looking society. We need to celebrate our cultural diversity, but also not simply for the fact that it's en vogue to do that, but because in reality, the different cultures that we have in the island also bring different skill sets. I found the conversation that Deputy Morell was perhaps contributing to, not in a ministerial capacity, but in a private capacity, talking about the brain drain. I find that quite interesting because Jersey's always been, in recent decades, an island where half of the people were born here and half of the people weren't born here. And I think that's both Jersey's strength. I think it's Jersey's strength. And sometimes it can be difficult for some people to get their head around that fact that actually Jersey's not for everybody. Some people, when they get their education here, and I think it's our job to educate everybody who is in this island, and we can't tie people to say you must come back to the island. People are free to do whatever they want with their education. But similarly, the flip side of the coin is that those 50% of the people who weren't born in Jersey, who've come to Jersey, often as adults, we get all their training and education that we didn't have to pay for. So we didn't invest a penny in the education of somebody who comes from Poland, the Philippines, Romania, wherever it is, and they come to work in Jersey and they bring all their skills with them. And I don't think I'm the only one who feels slightly uncomfortable when you're maybe sitting in a restaurant or a cafe and you know that you're being served your cappuccino or your veggie burger and chips, or whatever it is, by somebody who's probably more qualified than you. They've got like a master's degree, they may have got 2 degrees, and you know that actually if they were in an open market, they could probably be working in different jobs. And I think this brings us to the interesting objection that might have been raised, is that what if all these people who are currently working in seasonal jobs or in hospitality suddenly go and work in finance? What does that do to the market? Well, first of all, I don't think any of our white-collar organisations, be they law firms, trust firms, finance, are going to employ someone just because they're a seasonal worker, just because they're foreign. They're going to want to see their qualifications, and they're going to want to know that they've got the job. So if you've got somebody with the requisite qualifications who's perhaps worked in those industries back home, can do the job, can speak 3 languages as a minimum, and also can do those jobs and deal with those whether it's client-facing, who are here, or international clients, why shouldn't they be given the jobs? But as we've heard from Jersey Hospitality, they're also not anticipating a vast exodus from people, because there are seasonal workers here who will carry on doing those jobs. So it does give that element of flexibility, both, I think, to the employees and to the employers. So I think this is a well thought through proposition. It's one that's supported by both Jersey Business and Jersey Hospitality. And I would encourage government, who spoke so much in question time only a couple of days ago on Monday about collaborative working, living in the real world. Well, I'd say actually this proposition recognises that we do live in the real world. We do have to listen to both employers and employees. This is primarily a proposition which seeks to help businesses who are dealing with a set of circumstances. It has the support of those businesses. They've even gone to the point of writing a letter in support to states members, which is not always the case. And lastly, I think it's well thought through, sir. It's something we can support, and it's something that a government which wants to be collaborative and inclusive in its approach to Jersey's modern community, they should really also be supporting.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. There's no doubt that the proposition is seeking to support hospitality businesses in the first instance, and of course, no doubt, Deputy Kovacs has lots of experience in this, being an owner of a cafe herself. And I have myself come across a number of businesses in the island that are suffering from staff shortages. And in fact, one cafe in St Brelard actually has reduced the number of tables just because they cannot physically serve the tables. So there is no doubt that, and it's across the board, there's no doubt that there is a very tight labour market, and we have many businesses that are struggling to get staff. There's also no doubt that we have issues in terms of increasing population that need to be controlled and that need to be brought into account as well. And I'm just really quite sorry that the Minister for Economic Development isn't here to speak a bit about this proposition. I'm also sorry that the Jersey Hospitality Association, when it wrote this letter saying it worked hard to engage with states members to continue to find suitable solutions in terms of lobbying for this, didn't contact me as chair for the Economic and International Affairs panel, because I'm very interested in talking to business representatives too, and I do believe that I actually have a role in representing the community as well. And But I want to come back to some of the work which the panel has been doing, looking into, that the Minister for Economic Development has actually been going through, and producing, because this is a very kind of delicate, systematic area to look at. And one of the things that really, I do very much sympathise about this idea in which the resources, potential human resources in this island are not being used. It really is disappointing to think that we've got employers who are basically saying, unless you have 5 years residency, we're not going to employ you. Because if I use this logic, because I've actually, this Jersey Hospitality letter is saying, what this proposal does do is enable people to get a second job. That's the main criteria for which it's saying that it's offering support to this. But if you're actually using this logic, in another 5-6 months' time, we'll probably need to do the same thing, and then another 6 months' time, do the same thing, because it seems that nobody in the island or in the hospitality industry or somewhere are actually prepared to employ people who don't have 5 years left on their licence. That doesn't really make sense. And if that is happening, that's absolutely crazy. But then again, I also am very disappointed that part-timers aren't used more in this community, that more elderly people aren't used in this community. There is lots and lots of ways in which people have been discriminated against, and that needs to be addressed. And I think that there is a case for really looking into the ways in which employers can be encouraged to be more imaginative in their approach and be a little bit more flexible in their approach. Also, what we are talking about in terms of hospitality businesses generally are relatively low margin businesses that need to compete. Not all of them are paying the living wage, and there has been a bit of a push for this in this area too. So there's a question here about what is really being supported. Are we supporting progress or are we potentially supporting an element of regression? I don't really have that information. I know that that's been looked at. I know that amongst the areas that the Minister for Economic Development have been looking at is this barriers to business piece of work that Jersey Business, and I was a bit confused when Deputy Tadgia said this is Jersey Business's support. I mean, sorry, do we mean Jersey Business, the arm's length organisation, or do we mean some of the Jersey businesses which Deputy Kovash is looking to represent? But Jersey Business, as an organisation that's funded by government, has been exploring barriers to business. And that is a piece of work that is to be produced and that we really do need to see in terms of assisting businesses generally. So I'm not actually convinced that this, out of a number of options, is the best way forward. And I think I would prefer to actually see and get the results of the work that actually is being undergone. I actually really do sympathise with the impatience, though, and I do assure the Assembly that as long as I remain chair of the Economics and International Panel, I will be looking into this work.
So it was remiss of me, but may I say, sir, that I just wanted to put on the record that I have an affiliation with the hospitality business. I didn't want to, I'm not sure if I need to declare an interest, sir, but I meant to say that at the start of the debate. Thank you.
Thompson Clement.
So likewise, but I thought everybody was already aware of that. I have a large affiliation with hospitality business. Thank you.
Can I clarify something?
I don't think you can, not at the moment, no, unless
It's still on
Chancellor
the...
Rice is during someone's speech. You've got a closing
It's still on the declaration part.
Sorry? It's a declaration?
Yes, because
Yes,
I
of
mentioned
course.
in my speech that we own a family business in hospitality, but I didn't clearly say that is an interest, so could be
Well, thank you very
considered.
much. Yes.
And also this doesn't address just hospitality businesses.
Yes, of course.
So should be every business then?
Yes. Deputy Porre?
Thank you, sir. I would also like to declare that I own a small business. I run a small business and I employ 3 people on part-time basis. Thank you.
Does any member speak?
Sounds like we're all in here, isn't it? I own Coopers, so
Do you
we're
want to,
a
do you want to stand
hospitality-
up when you
Sorry,
speak?
sir. We own Coopers. We're a hospitality business.
Thank you very much. Does any member speak on the proposition? Yes, Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate what the Deputy is trying to achieve with this proposition and indeed in her wider discussions with ministers in recent months. And I know that she's been working very hard to try to find potential solutions to the recruitment and staffing challenges that we all know so many of our sectors are facing. And I'm really keen to see such conversations continue and regardless of the outcome of this debate today. However, in this instance, I'm afraid that this move as proposed is not something that ministers are able to support. And I should say at this moment in time, I am responding on behalf of the Chief Minister in her absence and with delegated responsibility in this area. The Deputy's report highlights the importance of evidence-based decision-making, and unfortunately, there just isn't the evidence there to support the proposals. And there are simpler, quicker and more effective ways to support local businesses which are experiencing staffing shortages. For that reason, and as I say on behalf of the Chief Minister, who's on official business and can't be here today, I do ask members to reject parts A and B of this proposition. I would ask if the Deputy would be willing to take it in parts so that we could support part C. So looking more closely at what is proposed, the Deputy's proposition requires the Chief Minister to provide entitled to work status to an estimated 1,600 individuals who currently have registered status and have been living in Jersey since the end of 2020. This can only be achieved through a change in the control of housing and work law. It's not legally possible to bring in a temporary scheme as suggested by Part A. Regulations would need to be drawn up and brought back to the Assembly for approval before they could be implemented. A much simpler action that can be taken without delay is to work with local businesses and identify any areas where additional registered permissions would be helpful in allowing existing residents to take up vacant positions. As the ministerial comment shows, nearly 90% of all applications for registered permissions have been granted this year. And ministers will continue to support businesses so that they have the permissions that they need. If there is a registered person living in Jersey who's not already fully employed and has skills that would support a local business with a staff shortage, then the business can request a registered permission to employ that worker. If there are people living in Jersey today who wish to work and are not able to find employment, it's important that their skills are put to good use. This simple and quick approach can be implemented without delay. The approach put forward by the Deputy has a number of drawbacks over and above the need to draft legislation. In terms of the individual person, to acquire this concessionary entitled to work status, they would have to prove their continuous residence in Jersey since December 2020, providing details for the last 2.5 years before they could take up the concessionary status. In terms of businesses, there could be a flow of workers in both directions. Some workers may choose to move to jobs in hospitality and retail where there are shortages, but other workers may choose to move out of these sectors into other areas such as finance. It's estimated, as I say, that around 1,600 individuals are covered by this proposal, and this represents very roughly 1/3 of all registered workers in Jersey. The ability of up to 1/3 of all registered workers to access any local job at the same time could create disruption in some areas. And there is a significant risk that the overall impact could be detrimental to the very sectors that the Deputy is seeking to support. So I appreciate that ministers should not oppose a proposal just because it would be hard to implement. However, in this case, Deputy Kovac's proposal can't be achieved without legal changes. It creates bureaucracy for the individual. It runs the risk of significant disruption to businesses, and it would also place a significant administrative burden on the small government department that currently administers the control of housing and work law. In an average month, this team processes around 100 to 150 applications for people moving to entitled to work status. A potential influx of 1,600 applications represents around a year's worth of extra work, which would all need to be dealt with at the same time. Part B of the proposition would also require a change to regulations, and this is to automatically provide entitled to work status to a spouse or partner of an individual who's granted entitled to work status under the concession set out in Part A. As individuals will always be granted at least registered permission when they arrive in Jersey, the great majority of spouses and partners will already have registered permission and will be included in Part A. The Deputy draws a comparison with the recent change to include unmarried partners under the existing control of housing and work regulations. And it may be helpful at this point if I explain the reasoning behind that proposal to show how it differs from what's currently before us. The control of housing and work law has always provided entitled to work status to the spouse or civil partner of an individual who held full local qualifications, who was coming to Jersey to fill a licensed job, or who had completed 5 years residency and had gained their own entitled to work status. The law did not extend to long-term partners who were not married or in a civil partnership. In seeking to recruit specialist key worker staff in the UK, experienced nurses and teachers, for example, applicants would often ask about the job opportunities for their partner. And when it was explained that unmarried partners would only be provided with registered status, some applicants then withdrew their applications. And this was seen as a barrier to attracting the best recruits to fill these essential key worker posts. The small change in the regulations has extended the existing right in respect of partners who were married or in a civil partnership to also include long-term partners who have an ongoing relationship of at least 2 years. Since the change in regulations, 27 unmarried partners have been granted entitled to work status, and the government has removed an unnecessary barrier to off-island recruitment. As I say, ministers do not oppose Part C of the proposition, as we're already reviewing the controls provided through the Control of Housing and Work law as a whole. And as I say, I'd like to ask the Deputy if she will take the vote in parts for that reason. I'd also like to respond to a couple of points made by the Deputy in our opening speech. The Deputy gave the example of a nursery needing staff and claimed that red tape could hold back someone who's in the island already with the skills required from being employed by such a nursery. In such a case, the employer can request a permission to employ that person, and as I've already shown with the figures provided, the vast majority of such applications are already being approved. Ministers have also committed to do more to work with employers in this area. The Deputy claims that her proposition will help some people get second jobs. For clarity, registered workers can already take second jobs. There are no restrictions on this. In her opening speech, the Deputy also sought to downplay the amount of work required to change regulations. And as I've already stated, those regulations would need to be drawn up, which takes time, and then brought back to this Assembly for approval. Why do this when there are simpler and quicker ways to approach the same problem? I'm grateful to the Deputy for sharing my policy position on population and specifically my desire to see an island where every member of our community is valued. And I'm really glad that we agree on that. And I'm very confident that the approach of ministers currently being taken and our commitment to working with others, the Deputy included, can help us to achieve that. To sum up, it's important for government to support businesses, and it's important that the government encourages everyone living in Jersey to participate in the labour market. Unfortunately, the Deputy's proposals before us today are not the best way to achieve this at this moment in time. They do not take account of the legal structure of the law, they create unnecessary complexity and bureaucracy, and they run a significant risk of creating additional staff shortages within sectors such as hospitality and retail. I urge members to reject parts A and B of the proposition and allow ministers to work with local businesses to provide additional registered permissions where this will help address staff shortages by making better use of registered residents who are not currently working. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I'm very pleased to follow that particular speech because it made many points that I wish to counter in mine. It strikes me that there are three main arguments that are being used against this proposition. The first being that it will have unintended consequences on the distribution of workers in our labour market, that the changes being proposed are too complicated to implement, and that they are already doing something to address this right now. And I think, sir, that every one of those arguments is flawed. So I'd like to go through them one by one. So the first one to go through is that this will be awkward to implement because it will require legislation changes. Well, if only there was some kind of body that existed to implement changes to legislation, a legislative body, a legislature, if you will, sir. If only such a body existed. Oh, wait, yes, there is one, and we're sat in it right now. It's our job to make changes to law to improve what services we provide for the public, if that's what we seek to do. That is not an argument against a proposition. It can only be an argument against a proposition if what the proposition asks to be done is impossible, and it's not in this case. We can choose to seek to change that law if we want. It can be done. There's no argument there. So the second argument I wish to go through is that their argument that we don't need this proposition because they are already doing something on it. Well, how well's that going? Do we not have a problem right now? If the current method, which is to simply use control of housing and work provisions to give those permissions, is working, then why are we even here? The obvious answer to that, sir, is that it's not working. We are hearing representations from businesses in different industries in the island to say that things aren't working and that things could be much better. What's happening right now evidently isn't working, and I found it very frustrating reading the comments from the government extolling the virtues of the current system and using the Controlling a Housing Work Law to give those permissions, because I served for 2 years on the Housing and Work Advisory Group. Part of its job at that time was to take applications from businesses to have permission to employ people without 5 years residency. And I found in that experience that it is not a good system. There are multiple problems with it, and it takes up far too much time and bureaucracy to allocate those permissions in that way. So firstly, sir, if a business is to apply for permission to employ someone without their 5-year residency under the current provisions, each application has to be administered by civil servants. They'll have to gather evidence and the facts underpinning that permission and the individual for whom that permission refers to, if indeed it does refer to a specific person, and that takes up a lot of time. Sometimes, I don't know if this is still the case, but it was in my time, that some cases had to actually go to the Housing and Work Advisory Group to be determined by a panel of politicians, something I thought was not a good use of our time. It was like in some respects, it felt like a mock Dragon's Den type situation, and I don't think that's the best way to be making decisions like this. So to argue we can't do what Deputy Kovacs is proposing because of the bureaucracy, but we'll keep doing what we are doing right now, that involves per application quite a lot of bureaucracy, strikes me as an inconsistent argument. But the second point on that is that if a business wants to apply for permission to employ someone without their 5 years residency right now, that business will do so, quite rightly, from their perspective. They will do so in the interests of their business, not in the interests of the macroeconomic picture, the wider picture, and for the economy as a whole. And it is, of course, entirely possible and likely that in that kind of system, that it's the more proactive and louder businesses that would seek to use that system, whereas those smaller businesses who don't necessarily understand that part of the system or even have the capacity to dedicate resources to engaging with that won't engage with it. And so you won't necessarily get an equilibrium there. You'll just get those who want to engage with that system. But the third problem I have with that argument is that in that instance, that system, it only considers the view of the businesses and not the workers themselves. It's the businesses that would apply to employ somebody when they become aware of that person, rather than that person being able to be proactive and say, I think my skills are best placed in this part of the economy. So you won't get the equilibrium through that. You won't get workers themselves being able to optimise where their skills are best placed in the economy. What Deputy Kovacs is proposing, by essentially making it across the board for people who arrived before a certain date, you will be much more likely to reach that equilibrium as people spread out across the labour market into the places where their skills are best suited. And the last argument to address was about the unintended consequences of this and how some businesses may see themselves losing their employees as a result of it as they go somewhere else that they suddenly have acquired automatic permission to go and work in. And that's why I was so pleased to read the letter from the Jersey Hospitality Association, who were welcoming this and who I think acted as very good advocates for their industry here and trying to, I think, dispel some of the old-fashioned views that there are around hospitality and the working conditions there, to say that actually this would free up workers to be able to take up roles, and many of them would choose for that to be in hospitality. They won't be fleeing it in their droves, is their view from the Hospitality Association. And good on them for, I think, making the case to States members in this way. And I, for one, am prepared to listen to them on this. So what Deputy Kovac has come up with this proposition is something in the absence of nothing. And I know the government say that they have a system for dealing with this, but it's no different to a system that has always existed since the advent of the Control of Housing and Work law. It's not a new system. It's not responding to anything. It itself is cumbersome and doesn't allow for any kind of natural equilibrium, but only for those who choose to proactively engage with this, irrespective of where workers may actually be best placed for this. Deputy Kovac has come up with a solution. It's one that has a date cut-off period in it, which enables us to see how this goes, to collect data, to understand what implications it has and how that may inform what future changes we may or may not want to look at for the Control of Housing and Work system. And it's one that we have heard from some who are very active in our economy and running businesses here would welcome, because of the freedom it would offer them and those who work in those industries. And that could well lead to significant easing in the labour market. There was, I thought, a strange comment made about people being able to have second jobs. But if you don't have entitled to work status and you want a second job, it can only be for another job that you don't have to have entitled to work status for. So I thought that was bizarre, and if you give them the freedom to be able to take on those roles, as Deputy Kovac is proposing, you may well get people who want to take up that second job or want to do a few hours working somewhere else. And just imagine what benefit that would be for the businesses who are then suddenly able to employ them, and the alleviation they would feel when many of those are struggling to find people that they have adequate permissions for to employ. And that has a wider impact, not just on our economy, but frankly our society, where we want those businesses to be able to provide services and not having to cut back on things like the number of tables they can have in a restaurant or anything like that. So I congratulate the Deputy for coming up with an innovative and well thought through solution to this. And I strongly disagree with the argument the government has made about the current system they're using to try to address this, which I think anyone who is awake can see isn't working.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Kovac approached me some time ago on this subject, but at the time she was interested in providing better employment rights to EU citizens who had pre-settled status under the Brexit agreement. Pre-settled status was granted to any EU citizen living in Jersey at the end of December 2020, immediately before the freedom of movement restrictions were introduced as a result of Brexit. Since those initial discussions, I can see that Deputy Kovac has taken further advice, and this has led to the current proposition. The Deputy's report mentions pre-settled status on page 3, but I note that her proposal covers any person who's been living in Jersey at the end of 2020, who has remained resident since then and has registered status. In reality, this will mainly impact on people who arrived in Jersey in 2019 and 2020. As we know, people arriving in 2018 or before will already have achieved 5 years residence and can get entitled to work status in the normal way. It's not possible to be completely accurate, but as we've heard, estimates suggest about 1,600 people fall into this category. Of those, about half are EU citizens who are likely to have applied for pre-settled status. The other half are made up of mainly British and Irish citizens and a small number of people from outside Europe. These groups were unaffected by the 2020 deadline. Deputy Stevenson has clearly set out the range of difficulties with Deputy Kovac's proposal. But in addition to the points that Deputy Stevenson has made, members should note that the December 2020 deadline has no particular significance for half of the individuals that will be covered by this concessionary scheme. If we consider one of the local construction companies recruiting workers from the UK, with some arriving in December 2020 and others in January 2021, this scheme would provide the December arrivals with early access to entitled to work status, but the January arrivals would not enjoy. It's difficult to justify an arbitrary date in respect of the British and the other non-EU workers included in this proposal. The Deputy also suggests that those EU citizens with pre-settled status would need no further checking to access the concessionary scheme. This is not the case. Holding pre-settled status merely confirms that the individual was in Jersey at the end of 2020. The proposition itself requires the individual to have been continuously ordinarily resident in the island since 31st of December 2020. This will require evidence of continuous residence in 2021, 2022 and 2023. And this will need to be checked in the normal way. With up to 1,600 individuals applying for the concession at the same time, this workload would create challenges for the operational teams working in this area. As Deputy Stevenson has said, 2023 is only 6 weeks away, and I think it's an unreasonable expectation to have a scheme up and running. It's been suggested by other speakers that there are no unintended consequences for industry. And I've read the letter from the Jersey Hospitality Association, and I can't say that I'm in agreement. Deputy Tadier made reference to hospitality workers being very highly qualified. We know that is the case. And surely a waiter with 2 degrees will be snapped up by the finance industry if given access to the local labour market. They will not be available to hospitality, and this will cause an issue for hospitality, potentially requiring hospitality to seek more work permits, which are more complex in terms of visa and travel arrangements. The comment's already been made that this is an employees' market. Indeed, it is an employees' market. Everybody already has a job. And I just get the feeling that we're kind of shuffling people around. Not creating, by creating extra vacancies and thereby creating extra demand. And finally, I just wanted to make a point about a conversation that I had yesterday. I had an engineering job that needed doing at my property, and the chap turned up yesterday morning. And he asked me where I was going, and I was telling him what I was doing in the States. And he said, actually, I know about this because if some of my workers get to entitled to work, this is really going to affect my business because as engineers, they'll be sucked up by the states who are currently seeking pumping engineer vacancies and other vacancies. It was of great concern to him that this could affect him in his recruitment. So, sir, I can't support A and B of this proposition. Deputy Stevenson has explained that she will work with business leaders to make sure that additional registered permissions are available to any business where they're able to take on somebody who is already here and has the skills necessary to support that business. There's a much more straightforward approach to the problem than Deputy Kovac has put forward. And I hope members will agree with me and oppose parts B and A and B of the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Miller.
Sorry, sir, that was a bit, that was a mistake, but I will do my speech now. Thank you, sir. Sorry, I'm a bit flustered. In a report, Deputy Kovac refers to the need for evidence to support decision-making. Yesterday, she circulated a letter from the Jersey Hospitality Association to all States members and suggested that previous correspondence had already been sent to ministers on this topic. With the letter, the Deputy seeks to provide evidence that the JHA are supportive of her proposals. Whilst this gives us some evidence, it does not paint a full picture. The previous letter from the JHA to the Chief Minister was setting out a case for help with staff accommodation. I'm confident this is a genuine misunderstanding, but it's important that evidence is accurate and seen in context. In the letter to the Chief Minister, the JHA wrote that their main pressure point, quotes, is no longer due to a recruitment crisis, but a housing shortage. It's correct that both JHA and Jersey Business have expressed general support for P49 on the ground that it might be useful. Both organisations have expressed the same reservation on the proposition, however. JHA wrote, having said that, we do have broader concerns about people leaving the hospitality industry. Jersey Business wrote, one potential unintended consequence of this proposed change is that there may be movement of workers from the core industries of retail, hospitality and agriculture to the financial sector, as the change will give individuals the ability to choose what jobs they apply for based on their skills rather than residency restrictions. The comments from the two organisations both relate to P49 itself. Neither of them seem to have commented as yet on the Chief Minister's suggestion, which was published last week. This, as already mentioned, sets out a much simpler solution of providing additional registered permissions in any area where there are staff shortages and there are people with registered status living locally who are available to take up that position. Both JHA and Jersey Business have at times expressed frustration with government bureaucracy. Deputy Kovac is suggesting additional regulations and a new set of rules to deal with a specific group of people. This will only increase bureaucracy. The alternative proposal of the Chief Minister is to use the existing law and provide extra support to business by extending an existing process. This is quick and easy to implement. Most importantly, it avoids the risk that both JHA and Jersey Business have identified, that a blanket transfer of individuals to entitled to work status may lead to a net reduction of workers in hospitality, retail and care, as these workers will have the freedom to move to other sectors which may offer better pay conditions. For example, sir, wages in hospitality are only just over half of those in financial services. Deputy Miles has already commented on the point about people being able to have second jobs, so I won't cover that. So to sum up, Deputy Kovac is asking members to approve her proposition to help improve the supply of workers to key sectors such as hospitality and care. However, the impact of her proposal will create bureaucracy and run a real risk of reducing workforce in those areas rather than increasing it. The Chief Minister's alternative proposal will achieve the desired result with less bureaucracy, less delay and with no risk of existing workers leaving jobs to move to other sectors. Ministers continue to support local industries, including hospitality. There are still many challenges to be faced, but unfortunately, I do not believe P49 is part of the solution, and I ask members to reject parts A and B. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I was going to wait, but I'd like to speak now. It's a real shame that we're hearing ministers talking down our hospitality industry constantly. It really is. That everyone will leave the hospitality industry and that a career in hospitality isn't a reality for people. Well, it should be, and it is. And I just want to point that out because I talked the other day, sir, about these pieces of straw that are put together into a straw man, and we're at it again. It's clear that, obviously, with the same speech writers, and we've got to check, we've already covered that point from ministers, which is a real shame. That what we're doing about this really well thought through proposition from somebody who knows about an industry and has worked in it and committed to it, who has consulted widely, way more widely than it's recognised by, it appears, the government, that has thought through the genuine issues that we're facing on this island and said, rather than simply saying to people, you are going to be limited by the number of years you're here, regardless of your skills, and we talk about using skills on the island for productivity. Do you remember that word, sir, that we talk about quite a lot? Productivity. And if we're going to improve our productivity, we need to use the skills that are here. But hold on a second. We have a skilled workforce that we can't do anything with because we've chosen not to. And if we do that, suddenly the last thing we want to do so is use their skills, because they might move into another area of our economy. Even though Jersey Business and Jersey Hospitality say, of course there's a risk, there's always a risk of these things, but it's unlikely to be significant. But no, what government want to do in order to simply oppose something yet again, to simply oppose something because it's not their idea, and this is an action that can be taken, is to clutch at these straws and put them together into an argument that in the end does not hold up. So let's look at what we're actually talking about here. It's really key to understand that only employment status changes in this proposition. Not the housing status or anything like that. It says that if you have been here for 3 years and you have settled status, and remember, sir, that settled status and all of those things that happened because of Brexit happened out of our control. We had no control over Brexit. We didn't have a vote on it here. It happened and it impacted massively on our workforce. So if you have settled, pre-settled status, which happens already, and people apply for it, and this notion that we had this during Brexit about what's going to happen with settled status is going to be a huge rush of people coming at any one time. And actually, again, the Department in Home Affairs dealt with it incredibly well. And I think we should be given some credit for their abilities, not saying that actually that's going to be an obstacle to making a practical and pragmatic change to our employment law. So what it does, it enables businesses and industries on this island to use the skills that are already here. And now there's a contradiction, an irony, I don't know, from government that talks about population policy, although we haven't really got one, and talks about using the skills and comes up with all of these fluffy statements about increased productivity by using the skills on the island. We can control population by using the skills of the people on this island and upskilling and training and encouraging them to move into the areas of most need. And we can target areas of most need in our industries using the people that we've got. But then the first opportunity that somebody brings to this assembly to say, well, let's make this sort of change for 2 years to see the genuine impact of it, we are told, oh no, you can't do that. You can't do that because it will have these significant effects. There's a noise being made, so it's putting me right off.
Sewing machine, I'm quite sure what it is. Probably isn't a sewing machine there.
I thought it was just my hearing. But
no, it's something, it's certainly a strange noise. Can we, I think it's coming from down there.
It was my microphone came loose, I think, sorry. It was my own fault. In a previous lifestyle, I said, right, let's start again, but we won't do that. Let's recap. It's always a good idea to recap. Repetition works. People might understand it better. This is a very simple thing that only affects employment law. I'll come back to that because it's a really key thread in what I want to say. It is utilising skills that are already on this island. And in 2 years, and it trials and actually produces data. And all of this, it's not fear-mongering, but it's not even just negativity. It's this idea, this notion that what will happen is as soon as you allow people to work and you don't control them by saying, we don't really care what skills you've got, you can be as qualified as you want, but you're going to stay in that little compartment for us, even though it doesn't really benefit our industries here, because we've got serious needs in some of these areas, but we can't really do it. In fact, I'll tell you what we'll do, sir. We'll import it off island and we'll pay extra money and we'll put them up, like in education, for example, £313,000 since January in importing teachers from UK agencies, giving money off of the island to UK companies, putting them up. I suppose it supports the hospitality industry because we're paying for their hotel rooms. That's a positive, I suppose, for the hospitality industry. We're putting these teachers up in hotel rooms and buying food and transporting them here and there for the airline industry. Whether they'll get their bags or not, I don't know, because they've got to recruit people for those posts. But let's move on. Instead of doing that, we could say there may be an opportunity here that we have people who are already qualified, that we can put onto our JTTP programme, people with degrees or even doctorates who might say, you know what, I might take a step into teaching, for example. But no, we're not going to do that now because of some very convoluted and very simplistic arguments that are simply saying, well, this was not our idea, so we're not going to do it. And we keep hearing about this transparency and collaboration and listening and working together. But when somebody brings a proposition that is so positive, we have a government who was immediately saying, no, we're not even willing to give this a chance. And I'm very disappointed by the comments paper, because it raised issues that even when Jersey Hospitality write to us and say, and I quote, we strongly support and commend any states member that is actively trying to support our industry and consider the impacts of their choices on our industry, an industry that is the beating heart of our island. Therefore, at the end, we applaud Deputy Kovacs in his proposal that is aimed to support local businesses and increase productivity. There's a couple of buzzwords for the government, sir. They love those words. Support local business and productivity. Do a search of any government document, they'll be all over the place. That clearly aim to support local business and increase productivity. Amongst these have already been chosen to Jersey to make their place to work and live. We strongly support and commend. But no, I dismiss that because they don't quite fit in the things that we want to do at the moment. And so these are from when ministers aren't even in the Assembly, and the Chief Minister isn't in the Assembly to talk about this. So we have a serious issue on this island that isn't going to go away. And what we don't want to be is sitting there, it would be politically disastrous, by the way, those in governments. In 3 years, 2.5 years' time, we're sitting back here looking at the fact that we're actually losing our population. We can't fill any jobs because we didn't take an action a couple of years ago, which may have actually made a change to those who are already living here and will stay here and will eventually gain entitled status and can work in these entitled jobs. It will be a real risk politically to ignore that. Just put that into the mix for you. And we'll sit here at that time and say that we've got a disastrous situation in our economy which isn't functioning well because we don't have the skills and we don't have the people and we don't have those, when we've still got this bank of people who have the skills or may have that we didn't use 2 years ago. And that's what I can't work out. And that's for regulations, sir. Oh, we have to bring, we have to bring, I wrote it down, I can't remember, I'm writing again. We have to have regulations drawn up and brought back. That's what we're here for. If it works, if it's important, we can see a solution to a problem for business on this island, so we can support local business and increase productivity, let's say it again, then we should be taking that time to produce those simple regulations, a simple change to the entitlement of work from 3 years to 5 years to 3 years for a short time. That's all the changes needed, so that people have that right to entitled status. Plus, I've got to reiterate the argument made about taking a second job. Yes, you can, but only an unentitled second job, unless you have entitled status. It doesn't make sense. And so, again, I think we're at a situation in this Assembly where it does seem that whatever's brought, government is going to oppose, unless it can water it down so much that it's ineffective. And we're doing it again here. And so I urge members, don't fall for the thing that happens a lot. You can vote for one bit, so you can vote positively on one bit, so we'll accept one bit, which, you know, doesn't make any sense unless you take the other two pieces, so that we can give you something positive to do. That's patronising to us as members, and we shouldn't be falling for it. Look closely at what we're trying to do here. Listen closely to what's being said by Deputy Kovacs. Read the comments paper, and then read the report itself, which addresses those issues so carefully. And please make an intelligent decision on this. We've now got a lot more members back in the Assembly who I hope are actually listening to the debate and taking in these ideas. Because if we don't do something about our industries on the island urgently, we are going to have a serious situation that will grow and grow and grow on this island. And if we end up having a situation with depopulation, it happens rapidly to islands, and that's the last thing that we want. We need to, if I can finish with a footballing analogy, sir, we need to put our foot on the ball and we need to look around us and pick the right pass. This is the right pass because it creates openings and opportunities, it creates chances. So take the opportunity, sir. I'm going to stretch this analogy to score a goal today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on this proposition? Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. I would just like the proposer in her summing up speech to outline if there would be potentially any concerns that she may have if we are to see a movement in the labour market where some people are potentially now going to be available for some jobs that they were previously not available to, and what impact could that have on Jersey's low-wage economy sectors? Because I think there are maybe some members who are maybe asking that question. I don't think it's been asked in the Assembly as yet, because I know certainly from my perspective, it's good to see upward social mobility and people being able to go into new jobs that they previously were maybe not able to access, and obviously then see that they have an improved level of income. But I think for those businesses in the lower wage economy industries, it's going to be quite difficult to then try and recruit people when already it's not exactly a very attractive place to come to Jersey, when your wage is fairly diminutive, and of course we have a high cost of living. So that's all I've got to say, sir. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on the proposition? Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. I guess I come at this from an Environment Minister's point of view, thinking about planning policy. And we have an island plan, and the route to changing an island plan is deliberately difficult. It can only be done in the context of a full island plan review, and that involves a process set out in law, involves public consultation, the appointment of a planning inspector, and so on. And I think that has some relevance here, because I think, and the other thing I think that relates to that difficulty with planning policy is that there are many codependencies in there. You can't change one thing in planning policy without having effects in all sorts of places. And that, I think, is of relevance here, because I do think that changes of the kind that this proposition suggests do need to be we do need to approach them with a lot of caution. I think the burden of proof does have to be high, because the law of unintended consequences does leap into view. My take listening to this debate has been that there seems to be a slight contradiction here. It seems to me that this proposition pretty well has to lead to job shortages somewhere, because what it does is allow people to move around between sectors. That is its whole point. The whole point of the proposition is to give workers the chance to access different parts of the labour market. And when they move somewhere else, a vacancy must be created. And we don't know exactly how many people will do that, and we don't know exactly where they will move or whether they will move. But we do have some data that might give us pause for thought. In the hospitality sector, the average wage is around £550 a week. That compares to an average in the island of £860, and in finance of £1,170. I'm not quite sure what the average is for government employment, but the point is that we're talking about giving the freedom to move to people who are in a relatively low wage part of the economy, and giving them the potential, at least, to move to somewhere in a more high-wage part of the economy. So the contradiction that seems to sit here is that this proposition aims to support hospitality, but it also aims to support individuals by giving them the freedom to move. And the latter, it seems to me, has a very serious possibility of undermining the former. So, to me, our labour market and the controls on it are complex and subtle with many interdependencies. I think that Deputy Mesick and Deputy Ward slightly missed the point about the difficulty of changing the law. It's not that we can't do it. The problem is that if we have difficulty in doing it, and it's a complex job to do it, then we have to look closely at the risk-reward equation. It means that it's not a thing that we should just do lightly. And as I said from the comments I've made so far, I think that at the very least there are significant questions raised about whether this will achieve what it wants without having unintended consequences, and whether indeed it will even achieve what it wants, what it's intending to do. The route, it seems to me, that is available is the better one. That route that people can apply for new permissions,
that doesn't create vacancies elsewhere, because that will potentially bring somebody new into the island, and therefore there won't be somebody moving from one job to another and creating a vacancy. There is, of course, a bureaucratic load in doing that, because we are managing the labour market, and we do need to keep control of it in the absence of ability to directly control immigration. But it is a well-understood system. It may be that there are changes that we could do to make it work, and we should be looking at the wider framework and questioning that. But I do think it has to be done in the round, looking at all the pieces of the jigsaw and not picking at one with the potential for unintended consequences. So I would urge members, as the government position paper says, to reject parts A and B. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Yourself.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to begin by saying relentless focus is something that's very often quoted in this Assembly. And if anybody has a relentless focus on resolving problems, it's Deputy Kovacs. She has a relentless focus on identifying need, doing her research, and I think she's my most diligent colleague. It is disappointing to hear from ministers that their opposition is based on the fact that they wish to have conversations with the business sector. I think it's quite clear Deputy Kovacs has filled that gap and had the conversations with the sectors that are affected. It's also disappointing that Deputy Kovacs had to make reference in her opening speech about correspondence that ministers had had from Jersey Business that ministers hadn't thought fit to include within their comments. And I can see an assistant minister shaking her head, so maybe Deputy Kovacs could explain further those comments that came from Jersey Business. So the ministers have talked about the need for evidence-based decision-making. I think Deputy Kovacs has done a pretty good job in gathering evidence. Deputy Kovacs is very connected to our small business community, and the diligence that she has shown in her research in discussing with officers, ministers and assistant ministers, in addition to the business community, about what potentially could be done to resolve a problem that exists within our local labour market. I don't think anybody could have done actually a better job. So to hear this proposition being criticised as something that maybe needed a bit more research, I think that's pretty poor. I wanted to pick up a bit about what the Minister for Home Affairs talked about the dates. Deputy Kovacs and I discussed this proposition before she put it in. She's a very pragmatic person, actually, and she was looking at a way to easily and quickly resolve an issue. She identified that people with settled status will have already done a lot of the work, and actually customer and local services and customs and immigration will have done a lot of the work to verify that people have been resident on island for the requisite period of time. We discussed then the unintended consequences of potentially just looking at people that had pre-settled status. And I had said to Deputy Kovacs that it was my concern that if it just included people that had come from Europe with pre-settled status, that actually what we'd be doing would be discriminating against people who had come from the common travel area or other areas. And that's why she broadened that. Now, a lot has been talked about bureaucracy, about the amount of work that it will take for people to prove their residence. Deputy Kovacs and I maybe have a bit more experience than others around what that bureaucracy might look like. And actually, for the vast majority of people who have been living and working in the island, their residency can be proven through their social security contributions record. And that would be the easiest way of doing that. Now, I don't think that, given the cost of living implications that we currently have on the island, that there will be many registered people that have been able to afford to continue to live on the island and not maintain paid work. So it's highly likely that those records to prove people's residence will be there and will be relatively easy to obtain. I wanted to pick up on the comments from ministers that this isn't the best way of resolving these issues, but what we have a severe lack of is a better way. We don't have a better way being presented from ministers. We haven't seen, when ministers say, well, there's problems with the dates or that they could have made an amendment to this particular proposition, but chose not to. In fact, what we're hearing from ministers is that they wish to begin conversations with the local business sector. I hasten to add that Deputy Kovacs seems to have filled a gap that ministers seem to have left in her consultation with the sector. I also wanted to comment on some of the comments that have been made about, well, this would give people freedom to move from job to job. What does it say to residents of the island that are here, that are paying their taxes, paying their social security contributions, part of our community, when they hear, and actually some of them would be entitled to vote, what does it say to those people when they are told by their elected representatives that they shouldn't have freedom to move to a potential better job opportunity? That they should have restrictions placed on them undertaking other part-time job opportunities. And I would like a minister actually to clarify the comments made by the Assistant Chief Minister, and potentially if there is any minister or assistant minister yet to speak, potentially they could show us where on the government website or where in the government policy guidance it clearly states that people that have registered status can be employed by employers in a licensed position on a part-time basis. So I would seek to get a second job. Yes, a second job. That was the Minister for Treasury and Resources, because I've looked on the policy guidance, I've looked in the comments paper, and I've looked on the government website, and it's certainly not clear. So there is indeed, if that is the case, a piece of work for government to do to make that very clear to employers and employees that that option is available. So I do encourage all members to support Deputy Kovacs. Deputy Kovacs is showing real leadership with her work here. She has shown great diligence and real relentless focus, something that seems to be lacking within this Assembly. And she is giving us an opportunity to support local businesses, to support the local community, and to support people who are actively working within our economy to use their skills to their best advantage. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on this proposition? Accordingly, yes, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And I'm kind of struggling to know where to begin here because I have no prepared speech. All I'm going to do is just respond to all of the various commentaries being made. The first one, which is extraordinary that Reform Jersey have not even begun to mention, is around the cost of housing. The biggest issue, employees, and certainly I employ 30 individuals in our business, and their challenge is finding affordable accommodation. Okay, so there's your starting line. So now the next point after that is, if you can't afford the rent, what are you going to do next? You're going to try and get better economic, a better job, a better paid job. So we are at the front line of that, exactly that front line, which is around individuals who have, and it really irritates me when I hear Deputy Ward talk about, oh, why do people, what was the word used, don't want to leave, you know, this premise that people don't want to leave hospitality. I think that's rubbish. People would stay in hospitality and stay in our jobs if we could pay them the level of wages they could find in the finance area, in the finance sector. We lose people with no qualifications, never worked in an office in all their born days, and are able to walk into an office tomorrow. So the moment we, and this idea that, oh, it's not fair that we allow people to move around in our economy, absolutely, great, if people can move around, that's fantastic, I have no issues with that at all, but who's going to fill the job that they vacate? We've got no answers to that whatsoever. And as I say, it really winds me up when I hear these kind of stories. Then we don't have a population policy. What are we, you know, what's the next thing? We put down allow a sort of full-scale importation of a labour force. Wow, that's going to play out really well in the public domain. It's just extraordinary, some of the commentary being made. But what I want to say is, I've been in this business for such a long time. We've gone through phases where government has been trying to withdraw licenses from us. We got down to a phase of 2 licenses for unqualified staff at one stage, and going back a decade. And I got a phone call, I recall the phone call, which said, I see you're only using one of your licenses. Can you reduce that to, can we just reduce your license qualification to 1? And I was outraged as a business owner that we were challenged so much to find staff at that time. The great news is, and I have to commend the Home Affairs Minister, we now have 6 licenses now, and every time we make an application or ask, because we are struggling to find qualified workforce, they help us and assist us. There's none of this, oh, you've got to try harder, why don't you advertise a bit more? There's plenty of people out there. No, the Home Affairs Minister and her team recognise there is a major issue in Jersey in employment. And as I say, to suggest that, what we'll do is we will just now, let's reduce the limitations, let's allow lots more people freedom to move around in a market where they will automatically, I mean, what world are we in? Whereby we already know, for instance, people who are in unqualified accommodation are in the worst housing situation. They are living in overcrowded positions. Because, why do they live in overcrowded? Because they can't afford a basic rent. They need to sort that out. That is my responsibility as Housing Minister, to try and resolve that. How are we going to bring down the cost of housing? Because if we can do something in that area and we can make that work, therefore we will make it easier for people to live, and hopefully we won't see people moving around in the way that they are forced to do at the moment. As I say, when people are being forced to move this, I love the idea also that we're talking about straw men. I think Deputy Ward talked about this. And he then goes and breaches the argument, and that is, oh, well, we're fear-mongering. Oh, people could move to education. So we're already talking about, so he recognises that people will move out of one job to another job, to maybe a better paid job. Again, who fills that job they leave behind? We are not resolving that issue. I just don't believe that Deputy Kovac has any solution here at all to the current issue, and I urge members to reject her proposition.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy Gorst.
I'm not sure I need to, having heard the Minister for Housing. I find myself, sir, supporting the government view, but having a lot of sympathy for the Reform Jersey proposal, because, let's be clear, evidence and practice over the last number of decades has shown that when, to a large extent, individuals reach the 5 years, they move from the job they are in, and they move largely into finance and business services. And that is practically what has happened. It is why the tourism industry, it's why the farming industry, it's why the retail industry have lobbied governments year on year to do something about it. So I find that we are potentially, and it's very clever of Reform Jersey to do this, potentially creating 1,600 people that could move from retail, hospitality, and those other sectors, and seek to take up jobs in financial services. I think that this is a proposition which is really aiming to say it's focused on supporting those industries, but by unintended consequences, looking at the evidence of what's happened in the past, and despite the letter, off camera, if I might put it like that, Deputy Mezek is shaking a piece of paper from the Jersey hospitality industry. But even within there is a recognition that there might be some movement. I don't see it as might be. I see it as there will absolutely be. And Deputy Feltham said that she felt that was absolutely fine. People should be able to move across industries, and that was not a problem at all. In fact, it was portrayed as a benefit. But we can't have it both ways. If we want to create the benefit to islanders to move, we can. But if we are seeking to ensure that some of the difficulties of recruitment in the industries that the proposer is talking about, this certainly, to my mind, because experience shows it, will not have that benefit. But so let's be clear, as you know, and I'm chastised in this assembly and I'm chastised in the street for supporting financial and business services. For that sector, it will be a very positive decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. If no other member wishes to speak, I call upon Deputy Kovacs to reply. Deputy Kovacs.
Thank you, sir. And I want to thank to everyone that contributed to this debate for all the points raised. Just going to look a bit through my scribbles for each speaker, because a few points I will address separately before I continue. I know from Deputy Scott mentioning that economic development is exploring barrier to business, and they wanted to hear from Jersey Hospitality. She would want to hear from Jersey Hospitality how these were explored. I'm very much aware that a meeting with them through that program of barrier to business have happened, and that those details, similar with what's been sent already to the ministers, have been gathered. When the letter from Jersey Hospitality was mentioning second jobs, which Deputy Scott and others have referenced, they're doing so because, as myself, we know exactly what the needs of hospitality are, and are many shifts which will have different patterns, will be peak times or weekends or evening shifts randomly needed at times. So you can't even predict an exact shift when will be necessarily busier or such. So you need those people that willingly are coming forward to increase their income in this cost of living crisis, wanting to take additional jobs within evening shifts, within those weekends. And that's what the second jobs discussion is about. And I know that was referenced from Deputy Stephenson and Deputy Gorst about if you register, you're allowed to a second job. Yeah, but not if the business doesn't have that register permission to access it. So that's what we're talking about. Who else? Sorry, just a second, looking through my notes. When Deputy Stephenson said I made a comparison with the unmarried partners changes, and that there is a difference to that. I didn't make directly with the content of the proposition, but is in the way that the regulations have been applied and the easiness of changing those regulations, which they argue that will be complicated. Deputy Miles said that our initial conversation about this was me trying to help just the pre-settled status. I don't recall the conversation exactly, no, I don't recall that way the conversation. It's exactly different, that I said that I identify what the aim of this proposition actually is. I identified that pre-settle could, because they've been partly verified and they are here already, to be granted permission to acquire those 5 years, that would be able to utilize them straight away. And actually, Deputy Miles at that point said that's a brilliant idea. And I didn't say as well that with the pre-settle won't be any further, no more checking. I said there will be less checking, especially because of them having this certificate, which covers a big part of their presence on the island. Deputy Miller quoted the Jersey Business letter sent, exactly what I've mentioned, but also she forgot to add the meaningful part at the end, where they see that of those workers which could see unintended consequences, they are not so worried that, I will quote it again, just to not put it wrong. However, of those workers, we are unlikely to see considerable movement, as many are seasonal workers. Deputy Renouf said that hospitality has an average salary of 550 per week. As the Jersey Hospitality Association and my experience in the field and speaking with colleagues in the field shows, the salaries have increased lately in hospitality as well, especially because of lack of people and competition, that in some parts are even higher than in finance. And why it's automatically the assumption that everyone would want to jump in finance? Are so many other skills that I was saying are in this pool of people that I'm talking about that are not utilized, especially are those skills that we have so many vacancies for. And that's why I was talking about across the industries and not just the hospitality. Yeah, hospitality is lacking more, but it's also retail, it's constructions, but are all those very important skills which from my work with these communities, I know very much that they have high qualifications in lots of these skills, even niche skills like engineer, road engineer, for which we brought consultants from UK. I've spoken with that person and wanted to apply, and they couldn't. That person left the island in the end. So we're talking about those skills that we have here. We pay or train or bring consultants on much more money instead of utilizing what we have here. I've covered that from Deputy Ward, saying that everyone wants to leave hospitality because exactly how I just said before. I'm happy that he wants to solve the housing crisis, and I really want him to continue to do so, but this is nothing to do with what's proposed here. Okay, so also continue to address some of the comments per general, as are similar with what is in the comments paper, but was, from what I've seen, was distributed a different part of each to each of the ministers speaking. So I will address it as per general. But before that, I just want to also quote on something to remind members that this is not out of the blue proposition, that it's seeking to build on work that we understand is already under consideration by government, as the extract from the sitting of Assembly on 13th of June 2023 on my question without notice to the Chief Minister, which said, has any consideration been given to give more freedom of work to the under 5 years residents already here to help with staff shortages and have additional contributions to the fund that we see are already ending at some point? Deputy Moore said then, so when I spoke about some of our migrations controls, that is very much the nature of our consideration. We have already begun to consider how our current rules impact upon people and their ability to work. Referencing then to unmarried partners, but this should apply to everyone else, because we're not talking just about those people having being prohibited. She says those unmarried partners are sick to work in the islands, whereas they would only be able to access a restricted pool of work, therefore prohibiting some people from being able to use the very skills that they had spent their working careers training for that, to that point. And I think that shows an example of the tangible difference that we're trying to make. So for some, we're trying to expand and give them the abilities to use those skills to their best ability and best place, but it's not applying for everyone. I would want to think that it is. Okay, so it has been said my proposition will require too much work, but the Council of Ministers also said they will just use the existing controls of housing and work provisions to grant business additional register permissions when they identify them. This makes little sense to me for several reasons. Firstly, each application will have to be administered by civil servants, taking up a lot of time and having to be judged on so many different facts and perspectives. Sometimes they will have to go to a housing and work advisory group to be determined, taking up politicians' time. They will also have to prove that that person they are applying for permission to employ lives in the island and is a genuine case of being the only suitable person for the role. All of this is adding layers of bureaucracy. Making it more or less automatic for everyone here pre-2021 means there will be much less evidence to have to evaluate before processing their entitled to work status, as at least half of them would have had enhanced verification before obtaining the pre-settled status certificate, and will just add the extra period, and they present that to population office in exchange for an entitled to work card. For the other part of them would be for same officers to verify in the system as they would do at any social security card issue if they have been here in the eligible period, which is a short one and can be easily seen based on their contributions record. Secondly, business will apply for those permissions based on their own self-interest, how Deputy Mezek highlighted before, not the interest of their wider economic picture. There may well be smaller business who would be equally deserving of the opportunity to employ someone without the entitled to work status, but who either don't know they can apply or are struggling and can't afford to dedicate the time and resources into applying. Equally, some businesses, in order to survive, could have temporary increased need of part-time staff for a weekend or so, or shifts to be covered with less notice. Being able to employ anyone available to come forward for those shifts could mean healthy business immediately, while trying to identify in the market who can come and then go through the bureaucratic process of evidence, all the evidence that they are advertising for long enough before they can be granted the permission is not helping in the same way. Thirdly, this approach only considers the view of the loudest businesses and not the workers themselves. Sometimes it is the worker who knows where their skills are best utilized, not a business who may not even know they exist. If they have the right to work anywhere, they will go and work where they are best fit. If only businesses can apply, only a small number of workers who happen to be identified will get those jobs. Lastly, the Council of Ministers also raised legal and administrative objections to the proposition, but they failed to acknowledge that this can be overcome with political will and cooperation, as it was proven so many times, and in the recent related changes to the housing and employment regulations regarding unmarried partners and students coming here with entitled parents, so clear proof we can do it. The proposition already specifies that the scheme would be temporary and short-time limited, which mitigates big part of the risk of unknown consequences, while collecting essential direct data about these consequences. The regulation changes, as shown in the other two recent related changes to it, are not complex, nor should take too long. It can definitely be done quite easily and in place by the end of September. The Council of Ministers also expressed concerns about the potential negative consequences of the proposition on the business sectors that rely on registered workers, but they offer no evidence or analysis to support their claims. They speculate that many of the eligible workers would seek jobs across the labor market, leaving vacancy in retail, hospitality, and other sectors. There's no evidence to stating that, but there could be if this temporary scheme comes in place. What is also not considered is that many of these workers may want to be working in these sectors and would simply benefit from having more security and flexibility in their employment status. There are many people wanting hospitality as a career, and we should not underestimate this, especially that lately the pay in this sector, how I mentioned, has become more competitive, as also the letter from the Jersey Hospitality Association confirms. To touch on the comments that all 1,600 across different sectors could move at the same time, no realistic scenario would see all eligible people applying and moving at once. Clear examples, why not? Since April, for unmarried partners changes, it was said there were only 27 applicants coming forward, when for sure are much more eligible in this category. For the community cost bonus, to receive over 500, with all the efforts to advertise from the government, from 12,000 households eligible, only about 4,000 came forward within a year. To move into another role, it's a long process to be recruited, then to best match the requirements and then to be selected. And if that happens, then it is the most productive way to use the worker within our economy. The comments made by the Council of Ministers are anecdotes. They also do not address sufficiently or quick enough the real and urgent problem of labor shortages in many sectors of our economy. They do not recognize the rights and contributions of many people who have been living in Jersey for a significant period of time. We need to address the urgent issue by using the best skills where they best fit. Business won't know that best fit is out there in this category unless the skilled person has the ability to apply and take those skills to a job interview where they see it themselves to best fit. Therefore, a permission to be given if the right fit identified under 5 years is less likely to help filling up vacancies with the best fit sooner than if the right fit person would know their skills and experience are best to fit there and go to apply. But they will do so only if they know there are no restrictions for them to apply. Otherwise, they won't even get to the interview process. This proposition simplifies the process of enabling people to be economically active, raising revenue, and addressing the issue. I have already showed in my opening speech that Jersey Hospitality and Jersey Business believe this would be unlikely to cause considerable negative movement for sectors like hospitality, and that actually my proposition will enable people to get second jobs or shifts there and then when needed, suitable exactly for this sector. In these cases, it is much harder to know when and for whom for a business permission for under 5 years for that person to help. These organizations, knowing best how their sectors work and what they need, are in support of my proposition and see it overall as a positive step. I've been in contact with many businesses and employees affected that are also keen to see this in place, as it will help them massively. They also consider, like myself, that many of these workers that my proposition would make available may have skills and qualifications that are currently underutilized or unrecognized in their current roles, and that allowing them to access more suitable jobs would enhance their productivity and contribution to the economy. Also, once the workers will find themselves in roles best suitable for their skills, it is more likely that retention in those sectors would increase and they would continue to want to see Jersey as their home instead of looking elsewhere where they would be allowed to use their skills. For the best skills to be placed in the best roles for those workers, the intention to apply has to be in the hands of the worker knowing best their abilities, and this is less likely to happen often if it is for the business to find out where those skills exist but are not allowed to apply and then to ask for a license for them. The latest won't maximize the chances of putting each skill and experience already on the island in the most suitable job, like the first option would. Sir, as I said before, this proposition seeks to amend the regulations on the employment status of people who have lived in Jersey for less than 5 years. This proposition is timely, sensible, and beneficial for our island and its economy. This proposition offers a simple and pragmatic solution to this problem. It proposes a temporary scheme that would grant entitled to work status to any registered individual who has been continuously ordinarily resident in the island since 31st December 2020 until December 2025, or until they attain 5 years residency. It also extends the scheme to their spouses or partners, provided that they are also ordinarily resident in Jersey, which are smaller numbers and for a much shorter period, as once the worker reaches their own 5 years period, their partner would already fall under the existing provision for partners of over 5 years residency. This scheme would not increase the population or affect the housing market or benefits. They will still only get access to those only when they have been themselves 5 years on the island. It would only apply to people who are already living in Jersey for over 3 years and who have already been granted permission to remain to build the 5 years by the government. It would not change their residential status or give them access to any other rights or privileges that are reserved for those with entitled status. This scheme would also provide valuable data and evidence for future policy decisions on employment status. It would allow us to monitor and evaluate the impact of the scheme on the labor market, the economy, and the society. It would also allow us to investigate with factual evidence the implications of reducing the 5-year residency requirement for entitled to work status, and report back to the Assembly by 30th of June 2024. This data is neither complicated or too onerous to collect, or without substance, how was suggested in the comments paper, especially being known in advance, the need to collect it and have it planned for, as the systems in customer and local services, which I know very well, easily provide these details. Actually, while I was working in CLS, similar exercises have been carried when we wanted to, for example, to see how many applications for something and for what categories, to know how we better tailor services. I will explain the very clear, quick process how to do this. When the worker subject to this proposition would go to population office to get entitled to work card, each worker would add the JOI number into a spreadsheet accessible to all officers doing these registrations. Management keeps it there, and in 2 years' time, upon expiry of this temporary scheme, a person in an exercise I would estimate not more than a day of work can easily go back to that list and verify it based on the job contributions record what sector's job they had been applied for when the card was given and what sector job they would have at that time. Does it still seem complicated or that would not show the reality? I believe it shows the opposite. The scheme could benefit our economy and society in many ways. It would increase the supply of workers available for roles that are currently restricted to those with entitled to work status. It would enable employers to fill vacancies faster and easier, reducing cost and improving productivity and competitiveness. It would also enable workers to find jobs that suit their qualifications and interests, increasing their income and satisfaction. It would also enhance social inclusion and cohesion by recognizing the contribution and potential of people who have chosen to make Jersey their home. We are facing a serious challenge in our labor market. Many employers in various sectors are struggling to find and retain staff, especially in roles that require entitled to work status. This is affecting the quality and availability of services and products that we all rely on and enjoy. It is also hampering our economic recovery and growth after the pandemic, growth being identified like the key factor in the population policy. The current regulations are outdated, rigid, and unfair. They prevent people who have already been living in Jersey for a significant period of time, who have contributed to our society and culture, who have paid taxes and social security, who have followed the law and respected our values, from taking up work opportunities that match their skills and aspirations. In the release of the annual report on population issues, the Chief Minister stated, "We need to provide a healthy, supportive, and sustainable environment and economy to enable all those who wish to contribute to island life to do so to the best of their abilities." And on the communication sent regarding students given wider access to local job market, Deputy Moore also said, "It reflects our ongoing focused work on removing barriers and fostering an inclusive island community where families and young people can seek to fulfill their potential. I am confident that it is exactly what my proposition would achieve if passed." Sir, this proposition is a win-win situation for everyone involved. It is a sensible response to a changing situation. It will help fill up many vacancies in different sectors that are desperate for staff. It is a fair recognition of people's rights and contributions. It is a beneficial boost for our economy and society, and I urge STAIRS members to support this proposition. Thank you, and I call for the appeal.
The appeal is called for. Deputy, how do you wish the Assembly to take your proposition? There are 3 sub-paragraphs. Do you want to take A and B together and C separately?
In this case, I will take it in block because the intention of point C was to have a review done based on evidence that point A and B would create, which if A and B doesn't pass, the review is still carried on, but with anecdotal evidence. So I will take it in block.
On block. Thank you. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting on the proposition. All members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. I announce that the proposition has been Rejected, 11 votes pour, 31 contre, and 1 abstention.
We have the 11 and the 1, please.
Yes.
Those members voting pour, the Conitab of St Helier, and Deputy Southern, Tadier, Rob Ward, Alves, Mesic, Coles, Ore, Catherine Curtis, Eltham, and Kovac, and the Conitab of St Clement abstain.
Next item is supplementary planning guidance, parking strategy lodged by the Conitab of St Helier. The main respondent is the Minister of the Environment. I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the Minister for the Environment to defer approval of the draft supplementary planning guidance on residential parking standards published for consultation in March 2023 until such time as a parking strategy for the island has been developed, consulted upon and presented to the States Assembly for debate.
Thank you, sir. This year, certainly since Liberation Day, I've had the pleasure and privilege of showing this Assembly, this chamber, to the 5 mayors of the towns with which St Helier is twinned. And they've all asked a number of questions. They've been very impressed by our Parliament chamber. They've all asked a number of questions. They've tended to fall into 3 groups. The first one, I need to spare your blushes, sir, is they've asked me how we elect our Speaker. And they've also commented on the sort of handy proximity of the Royal Court to the legislature. The second thing they've asked me is how on earth do I manage as Conitab to run the capital of the island with no council, because all of them have a council system. But the third question they've asked me is perhaps the most interesting one, because they've said, well, as effectively a mayor, why do you have a seat in the Parliament? I said, well, there's a bit of a history to that, but, and they've said, well, surely the 12 Conitabs having a seat in the Parliament must produce strange effects when it comes to voting, because they're not so stupid as to miss the fact that I have approximately 18,500 voters. The constable of the smallest parish has about 1,800. Deputy Alves has got the figures always to hand. So what it really means is that when we vote on a proposition which is of key importance to the people of St Helier, a third of the population, the vote of the constable of one parish is worth 10 times more than the vote of the constable of St Helier. Or to put it another way, the people in St Mary have 10 times more power over the votes in this assembly when the constables vote than the people in St Helier. And that is unfair. And so the reason I make that point is that the point of my proposition is about fairness. I simply believe that not only are the current provisions for parking provision in developments in St Helier unfair, but the draft standards that the Minister is contemplating make them even worse. Now, in his comments, the Minister says that is not true, and I refer to his second page, and he says the constable is wrong, they're not discriminatory against St Helier. But then later in those comments, he says this. He says the draft parking standards do not preclude car use or indeed car ownership. As currently drafted, they require minimum levels of car parking provision in association with residential development schemes, except where they are located in St Helier. Now, excuse me if that doesn't sound like a double standard. So we have minimum standards right across the island, except in St Helier, where we're going to have some maximum standards. So the situation in terms of parking provision by developers is going to get worse for St Helier residents. So I think that's unfair. And so I'm avoiding, at this stage at least, having a transport debate. We still have a lot of matters to discuss on the agenda. I'm not even going to go there. I'm not going to talk about climate change. I'm sure it will be mentioned by other speakers. I'm not going to berate the current Minister for Infrastructure for the fact that his predecessors failed to bring forward a parking strategy I remember one of them promising it to us before we left office, and that was 3 or 4 ministers ago. So we've been waiting to deal with this unfairness in the treatment of St Helier residents for years, certainly for more than a decade. But it's not his fault. He's only been in office a year, and I know he is very keen to fix the problem with parking. He understands, as I do, that just because you live in town doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy the use of a car, particularly at weekends and for holidays, or you may want to go on a fishing trip, who knows. The Minister also alleges in his comments that my proposition will delay the delivery of housing at a time of a crisis. That is simply not true, because the status quo, which, as I've said, is already unfair in its provision of parking in town, will continue to apply. And that parking permissions for housing developments can be given with the current standards, and the process will continue. What we should be doing as an assembly is having a debate about parking standards in Jersey, and it shouldn't be left to the Minister to make these decisions. It should be brought in that long overdue parking strategy to this assembly so that we can all point out the unfairness of the current situation, and we can say, look, if you want to reduce car ownership, Minister, then do it fairly. These SPGs are unfair. St Helier residents, by choosing to live in town, close to school, close to workplaces and shops, are the most environmentally responsible citizens in Jersey. And they're being rewarded by being told they can't own a car, we're going to make it more difficult for them, and so their use of cars will have to depend on a car club. Well, I'm sorry, so that isn't fair, and I believe that this is a simple proposition that should be accepted by the Assembly, and I make the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Colin Tower. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition?
So we only have 4 minutes before we're due to break. Can I suggest the adjournment?
Adjournment proposed. Any observations? Yes. Members content to adjourn now. Assembly stands adjourned until 2:15.